Chapter 3752. The tool spirit of the good fortune robe was also killed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen put away the good fortune robe and shook his head. He couldn't help but feel a little pity. Whether it was the tool spirit of the sword of fate or the good fortune robe, they were too stubborn. They would rather die than surrender. Yi Shiwen didn't intend to kill them all, and there was no need for that. He only borrowed the power of the good fortune robe and the sword of fate. Although these two treasures were supreme treasures, they were treasures of the fortune divine dynasty, and he couldn't possess them indefinitely. Secondly, there was no need for him to do so. If he could break through to the 9th stage of the heavenly venerable realm, his karma tyrant physique's defense wouldn't be weaker than the fortune treasure robes, nor would it be weaker than the sword of fate's attack. Although these two treasures were good, they were not as useful as the supreme ancestral symbol. Unless it was the good fortune universe map, it would be of great help to Yi Shiwen. This was the power that he could rely on, and it was also the foundation of his existence. However, although Yi Shiwen felt a little pity, he didn't regret it. There were not many choices left for him. After taking the two treasures, Yi Shiwen didn't go out immediately. Instead, he immediately sat down and began to refine the two treasures. Although he had erased the tool spirits of the two treasures, it didn't mean that he could immediately control them. Yi Shiwen's body emitted bursts of golden light, and there were bursts of strange phenomena behind him. The light of the world tree and the 3,000 martial arts resonated with each other, illuminating the entire treasure house world. Vaguely, there were countless gods preaching. The sound of the preaching was getting louder and louder, and it spread throughout the treasure house world. Many treasure demons sat down and listened to the preaching with a respectful expression. The Tao was a mysterious thing. If you understood it, then you understood it. If you didn't, then you didn't understand it. Therefore, each treasure demon could hear different things from the preaching. Each had their own understanding. Many problems that had troubled these treasure demons for many years were solved by the chanting. Many treasure demons actually broke through on the spot. This was the so-called when a man achieves the Tao, his chickens and dogs also rise to heaven. Yi Shiwen had also entered a state of enlightenment while refining these two supreme treasures. Whether it was the Lord of Good Fortune Heaven or the former Middle Heavenly Master, both of them had integrated their great Tao into these two supreme treasures while refining them. Yi Shiwen could now come into contact with the great Tao while refining these two supreme treasures. For him, it was like a head-on blow. The great Taos of these two supreme masters could only be used as a reference for him. But what really made him enter into a state of enlightenment was the great Taos of half-step sovereign realm. It was a completely different level of realm. This was very important to Yi Shiwen. If the previous fight with the Heaven City Lord had made him understand what the half-step sovereign realm was, then the process of refining the two treasures had made him understand how to truly cross this realm. This was something that only Yi Shiwen could do. If it were someone else, even if they had a little idea, it was unknown how long it would take for them to reach that step. However, the great Tao left behind by the two great masters in the two supreme treasures had pointed out a bright path for him. In fact, it was a bright path. The key was that Yi Shiwen had the help of the mysterious space, which could help him continuously analyze this information. Every minute and every second, he could comprehend the Tao that others could comprehend for 10 years, or even 100 years. But to achieve this effect, he had to burn the dragon veins in his body one by one. Even the king-level dragon veins, which were enough to make a big sect flourish, couldn't be used for long by Yi Shiwen. But this time, he didn't regret it. Other than the dragon veins, he still had 99 energy balls. This was a huge amount of wealth, enough to support his breakthrough. He had unprecedented wealth. Moreover, he was the temporary prime minister of the Fortune God dynasty. The Fortune God dynasty's resources were at his disposal, so he naturally didn't lack these resources. For a heavenly venerable, a king-level dragon vein, was already an extremely pure energy. However, these energy balls seemed to have been purified even further. Yi Shiwen guessed that they were formed after being purified by a half-step sovereign. It was absolutely impossible for them to be formed naturally. Among half-step sovereigns, this was probably a hard currency. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Yi Shiwen had truly spent 10 years in the world of the treasury. In these 10 years, Yi Shiwen didn't move an inch. He was frantically trying to comprehend the laws of half-step sovereigns contained within the two treasures. After a long time, he finally opened his eyes and let out a long breath. In an instant, the entire world of the treasury changed color, and all the treasure demons woke up from their preaching state. Their faces lit up with pleasant surprise. Although it was only 10 years, it was more than what they had gained in 100,000 years. For these treasure demons, because their grandiose were incomplete, every step they took was especially difficult. Many treasure demons had already reached the same realm as their previous masters, and their previous master's realm had also trapped them, making it impossible for them to break through. Many of them hadn't made further breakthroughs for tens of thousands of years. However, after listening to Yi Shiwen's sermon for 10 years, they had made breakthroughs one after another. Those who hadn't made breakthroughs had also found their own path. This feeling was too mysterious. If possible, they couldn't wait to continue for a longer period of time. But the moment Yi Shiwen ended his preaching, they also woke up from the process. Many thanks for Lord's teachings. These treasure demons stood up and saluted in Yi Shiwen's direction. Whether these treasure demons were usually gentle, well-educated, or tyrannical, at this moment, they all saluted respectfully. This was respect for the Tao preacher. Yi Shiwen nodded. These treasure demons had gained a lot in this period of time, but it was only a small amount that slipped through the cracks of Yi Shiwen's fingers. He had truly gained the most. In these 10 years, he had truly understood his own Tao, and breaking through to the 9th realm was only a matter of time. Once he broke through to the 9th realm, he would have the strength of a half-step sovereign. Time, what I lack the most right now is time. Inside Yi Shiwen's body, an energy ball was directly grabbed by the giant hand of law, and then swallowed into his stomach. Suddenly, it turned into a violent torrent of energy that dispersed into his limbs and bones. This violent torrent of energy helped him to break through from the 8th realm to the 9th realm. He already had a clear path to break through to the 9th realm, but what he lacked was time. Give me a little more time, just a little more time will do. Yi Shiwen clenched his fist. Only he knew how much he longed for time. Although he had saved countless years of time with the help of the mysterious space, it was still not enough for him. He still lacked the time. The gap between a half-step sovereign and a peak heavenly venerable was too great. It was like a mortal trying to traverse the galaxy, a hopeless situation that could not be crossed. Right now, he had forged a battleship for himself, but the problem was that he needed time to traverse the endless galaxy, and would those people give him such an opportunity? Suddenly, the entire world of the treasure house began to shake violently, as if the end of the world was coming. A terrifying force continuously transmitted from a distant space into the world of the treasure house. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. This was the deepest part of the Fortune Divine Capital. How could anyone transmit the aftermath of an attack to this place? Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, his body swayed, and he appeared at the entrance of the treasure house. At the entrance, the War Elder was already waiting. As soon as it saw Yi Shiwen coming out, it immediately sealed the world of the treasure house. This was to prevent the treasure demon from suddenly running out of it. What the hell happened? Yi Shiwen frowned and asked. The primal chaos overlord has come out? Replied the War Elder. Yi Shiwen's brows relaxed, but he was not surprised. From the sudden eruption of such a huge wave, he had already guessed that the primal chaos overlord had come out. To cause such a huge movement, there was no other possibility except for a half-step sovereign-level expert. Although a peak heavenly venerable was powerful, if they wanted to show off in front of the fortune divine capital, only death awaited them. And if it was a foreign half-step sovereign from the ancient era, it was even more impossible. They could not pass through the 10 great divine cities and suddenly launch a sneak attack here without him receiving any news. It really is him. Yi Shiwen nodded solemnly and said, "Come, let's go out and take a look. It's been 10 years, and I also want to test my progress in these 10 years. At the same time, I also want to see how powerful this world-famous primal chaos overlord is. Even the fortune divine monarch was afraid of him in the past." The war elder could not help but be shocked when he heard Yi Shiwen's words, because he knew that Yi Shiwen must have made great progress in these 10 years. Otherwise, he would not be able to say such words. At this time, Yi Shiwen's progress was definitely good news for the fortune divine dynasty. Especially when a middle heavenly venerable was in deep seclusion, and would not come out unless it was a matter of life and death. The two of them moved extremely quickly, and in the blink of an eye, they had already arrived at the edge of the fortune divine capital. At this time, they could see a domineering figure floating above the entire fortune divine capital. Chapter 37:53. At this time, as far as the eye could see, it could be said that everything was in ruins. Everything had been destroyed by violence. It was incomparably miserable. 1/10 of the entire fortune divine capital had been destroyed. The array formations and boundaries had been activated, but it seemed like they couldn't stop the onslaught. The last time the foreign biological soldiers had besieged the fortune divine capital, they had even killed their way into the fortune divine capital. However, they hadn't caused much damage because the entire battlefield was confined to a very small area. This time, however, it was different. 1/10 of the area had been destroyed. Based on the size of the fortune divine capital, 1/10 of the area had been destroyed. This meant that at least billions of lives had been lost. Moreover, these were the elites and elites of the entire fortune divine dynasty. They were the direct descendants of the direct descendants. Such a loss would have been enough to make a middle heavenly venerable vomit blood. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen and the war venerable only looked at everything in front of them with solemn expressions. They weren't surprised. If it had been from the outside, even a half-step sovereign expert wouldn't have been able to cause such shocking damage in such a short time. Otherwise, the fortune divine capital wouldn't have been known as the world's #1 dragon's pool and tiger's den by the foreign expert. Even a peak heavenly venerable wouldn't have been able to return after being discovered. Even a half-step sovereign would find it difficult to break through the fortune divine capital's defenses, especially when there were many heavenly venerables overseeing it. This was because the fortune divine capital's defenses were chain-like. All the defensive boundaries and array formations were linked. Even if it suffered a huge attack in an instant, it could be dispersed to other places. Therefore, it was very difficult to break through. It was originally set up by the fortune divine lord, and later reinforced by many heavenly venerables, so it was already abnormally strong. However, the chaotic overlord was different. He was sealed inside the fortune divine capital, so he had fought his way out from inside the fortune divine capital. Naturally, he would cause such a shocking number of casualties. I was careless. I originally thought that he wouldn't come out so quickly. Who knew that he would break free faster than I expected? Yi Shiwen said as he looked at the chaotic overlord in the sky. This matter can't be blamed on the Eastern Heavenly Venerable. We didn't consider it thoroughly. At this time, Middle Celestial Venerate's trusted aide, Mr. Huang, who had not been seen for a while, also appeared here. It wasn't just Mr. Huang. Several other heavenly venerables and imperial monarchs in the creation divine capital had also gathered here. Originally, when the primal chaos overlord suddenly broke free, it caught them off guard. Even a few imperial emperors were casually pinched to death by it, and a heavenly venerable was severely injured. This was the reason for such a shocking loss. It doesn't matter. You don't need to stay here. Go back to your respective positions and preside over the array formation and enchantments. I will deal with the primal chaos overlord, said Yi Shiwen. If these formations and boundaries were to display their full power, they would need the protection of these extreme Taoists. These extreme-grade powerhouses flew toward their respective posts. Although they had not practiced before, these people were very powerful, so it did not hinder them from quickly understanding what they should do. Yi Shiwen looked up and saw that the primal chaos overlord was floating in midair. A terrifying power was suppressing the entire creation divine capital. This was only the creation divine capital. If it were any other place, even if it were the ancestral land of a great sect, it would directly collapse. It would be impossible to resist. For a newly developed place like the human race, it would be conquered in less than one round. It would be impossible to resist. It was indeed very strong. At the level of the primal chaos overlord, he could single-handedly prosper the country. When the creation heavenly lord founded the creation divine dynasty, his cultivation was only at this level. At this level, he was actually at the peak of countless eras. The number of people who could produce such a figure could be counted on one's fingers. There were even some weaker eras that only produced one such figure in an entire era. Masters who reached the sovereign level were even rarer. There might not even be one in an era. Therefore, the primal chaos overlord dared to block the entire creation divine capital without fear. The primal chaos overlord was very domineering. Although it was not the first time Yi Shiwen saw the primal chaos overlord, it was the first time he saw the primal chaos overlord's true body. The primal chaos overlord's incarnation was not worth mentioning compared to the true body. It did not even have 1/1000th of the true body's strength. The primal chaos overlord opened his mouth and suddenly appeared on the land of the central region. Every time he opened his mouth, there would be living beings within thousands of miles directly turned into a mass of blood fog, forming a torrent that courageously rushed into the primal chaos overlord's mouth. The blood essence of countless living beings within thousands of miles were all swallowed by the primal chaos overlord. After that, it could be clearly seen that the primal chaos overlord's aura had recovered a lot and was much more tyrannical. Obviously, during the period of time when it was suppressed by the creation heavenly lord, the primal chaos overlord had no way to achieve basic recovery. And the primal chaos overlord had been recovering day by constantly swallowing the blood essence of these living beings, and was becoming stronger and stronger. It can be said that this is the primal chaos overlord's weakest moment. I can't let him continue to do whatever he wants. With the primal chaos overlord's own strength, it was unknown how many living beings it would have to swallow to recover to its peak. It would definitely be an abyss of suffering. However, Yi Shiwen discovered that the primal chaos overlord was not leaving at this time, nor was he attacking the divine capital of creation. He was only swallowing the blood essence of living beings to recover his strength while constantly chanting and forming hand seals. Soon, Yi Shiwen discovered that above the divine capital of creation, the shadow of the creation universe map was faintly discernible, protecting the entire divine capital of creation, not allowing the primal chaos overlord to take a step further. And the primal chaos overlord's target was also the creation universe map. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that the primal chaos overlord actually wanted to subdue the creation universe map. If it was during the divine dynasty's most prosperous period, it would have been impossible. But now, the divine dynasty could not find anyone who could contend against the primal chaos overlord. If the primal chaos overlord continued to refine it for a long time, it might really be possible. And this was something that Yi Shiwen would absolutely not allow. Yi Shiwen took a step forward, and instantly appeared above the divine capital of creation. The sword of destiny directly emerged in his hand, and he suddenly swung it down. In an instant, the weather changed, and the world seemed to be split open. This sword almost seemed to flash, and directly appeared in front of the primal chaos overlord. And the primal chaos overlord also reacted in an instant. Instantly, a chaotic force field appeared around his body, and the sword directly sank into the chaotic force field. Although it was blocked by him, it also blocked the primal chaos overlord's actions. This made it impossible for him to continue to attack the creation universe map. He couldn't help but frown slightly. One should know that he wouldn't even look at the attacks of ordinary heavenly masters, and he wouldn't care at all. Although he was not at his peak now, ordinary people could not easily injure him. Only peak heavenly masters could possibly pose a great threat to him, but this time, the middle heavenly masters didn't appear. Although he didn't know the reason, it was good news for him. He could take the creation universe map as his own in one go. If he waited for the other Supremes to rush over, the situation would be a different matter. Although those Supremes were only peak heavenly masters, they carried the huge destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. Even if they couldn't kill him, they could still pose a sufficient threat to him. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. From the point of establishing the Fortune God dynasty by the Fortune Heavenly Lord, he was already inferior. In the past, he could also be said to be a king in the fortune world, an invincible figure, but at that time, he was not able to establish a behemoth like the Fortune God dynasty that encompassed more than half of the fortune world. He and several other half-step sovereign-level figures each had their own forces, but compared to the Fortune God dynasty, they were obviously far inferior. Moreover, he wholeheartedly wanted to go one step further and break through to the sovereign level. Who would have thought that a junior like the Fortune Heavenly Lord would surpass him and establish a behemoth like the Fortune God dynasty? From the moment he was defeated, he knew that he wasn't big enough. Originally, the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch was only on par with them, and they were evenly matched. However, ever since the establishment of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, Fortune Heavenly Monarch had represented the countless races that had been oppressed by the foreign world's creatures. What was Heaven's will? Heaven's will was the will of all living beings. When all living beings had pledged their allegiance to Fortune Heavenly Monarch, what could stop him from moving forward? From the first time they fought, he was able to suppress the Fortune Heavenly Lord. Later on, he tied with him and then surpassed him. It didn't take much time at all. Such a frightening speed had frightened them, but it was already too late by the time they reacted. The Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch was already fated to be the Heavenly Monarch. After defeating him in battle, he broke through to the sovereign realm in one fell swoop and suppressed him with a flip of his hand. Although he didn't die, he knew that it wasn't because he couldn't kill him, but because there was no need to. The situation was different now. Compared to the Fortune Heavenly Lord who organized the Fortune God dynasty, the foreign domains were still in a state of disunity, each doing their own thing. It wasn't without reason that the foreign domains had been beaten by the Fortune God dynasty all these years. The Fortune God dynasty's supreme could even mobilize the Fortune God dynasty's destiny to suppress and kill powerful enemies. And now, he wanted to change this situation. If the Fortune Heavenly Lord could do it, there was no reason he couldn't. "It's you!" The Chaos Overlord looked in Yi Shiwen's direction, but when he saw Yi Shiwen, his eyes suddenly burst with terrifying killing intent. Chapter 3754. Chaos Overlord recognized this person immediately. It was none other than Yi Shiwen. How could he not remember this person? In fact, in this world, other than the Fortune God dynasty, only Yi Shiwen had made him suffer. Even though Yi Shiwen was only a wisp of his soul incarnation, it was still a great humiliation to him. Others were worried about the identity of his real body. Most people did not have the strength to deal with his spirit incarnation. Even if they had the strength to deal with his spirit incarnation, they would not attack so unscrupulously. But Yi Shiwen attacked just like that. Not only did Yi Shiwen destroy his spirit incarnation, but he also beheaded the only remaining disciple he had. Even with his cultivation, it was very difficult for him to groom a disciple at the heavenly venerable stage. This was unlike those below the extreme grade, which could be trained in batches. But when it came to the extreme grade, even if it was the sovereign emperor, it was impossible to train them in batches. It could only be said that with his guidance, this pattern could be greatly increased. Not to mention breaking the restrictions of the rules and breaking through to the heavenly master realm, which was even more difficult. Among his current disciples, there was only one heavenly master level disciple, and now he was beheaded by Yi Shiwen just like that. The heartache in his heart could be imagined. It was far more serious than Yi Shiwen killing his spirit incarnation. You still dare to show up? Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen coldly, wishing he could strangle him directly. However, the Chaos Overlord was not someone who only talked and did not practice. Almost as soon as his voice fell, Yi Shiwen instantly felt that all the surrounding laws were boiling. Those laws that could only be sensed and could not be seen emerged one after another, completely forming a terrifying torrent that blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that he had lost his control over all the principles of the world at this moment. He had been deprived of his control over all the principles of the world. This was the first time he had completely lost control of these laws since he had fought with someone. The strength of a heavenly master was not really that strong. To a large extent, it was also very important to borrow the power of the laws to attack. But now, the primal Chaos Overlord had stripped him of his control over the laws. Ordinary heavenly venerables were no longer able to contend against it. Although heavenly venerables were strong, they were too weak in front of a half-step sovereign realm expert who controlled all the laws. In the heavenly master realm, every realm was like a whole new world. Every step was like ascending to the heavens. Except for people like Yi Shiwen, who had all kinds of fortuitous encounters, other people would be completely unable to cross these natural chasms. After being deprived of all control rights, the terrifying torrent of laws directly crushed towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! An incomparably deafening explosion was heard. That terrifying tide devoured and drowned everything in its path. Eastern Celestial Sovereign. Not good. Damn it! Many people couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this scene. However, there was nothing they could do. A battle of this level wasn't something they could participate in. They could only watch from afar and couldn't even lend a hand. Now, he could only watch helplessly as Yi Shiwen was engulfed by the law tide. Many people knew that a half-step sovereign realm expert was terrifying, but this level of terror was still beyond their expectations. It was much more terrifying than they had expected. Suddenly, they felt cold sweat dripping down their back. The Eastern Celestial Sovereign was the leader of the entire Fortune Divine dynasty. Now that even he was about to fall, was there any hope for the entire Fortune Divine dynasty? Many people even felt despair for the first time. Facing a half-step sovereign realm expert, they didn't have the slightest chance of winning. This was just one of them. When the ancient era's half-step sovereigns also appeared, how would they resist? Was the fate of the martial epoch going to end here? From the ancient records, they knew that not all great eras could come to an end of old age. That terrifying scene of heaven collapsing and earth splitting, the mournful wails of all living beings, made their hair stand on end. It was because they, too, could die. However, just when they were all exclaiming in surprise, they saw Yi Shiwen's figure appearing in the midst of the frenzy. He was wearing a treasured robe that was engraved with an ancient symbol of asking for directions. It was protecting him. Good fortune treasured robe, it's the good fortune treasured robe. Many people couldn't help but exclaim because they recognized that this was the magic tool that made the Fortune Divine Monarch famous. If the Fortune Divine Monarch hadn't refined the Fortune Creation Universe map later, this should have been the Fortune Divine Monarch's life Tao tool. It was the good fortune treasured robe that protected Yi Shiwen. It protected him from being seriously injured by this torrential tide of the principles. Yi Shiwen didn't move at all, and he didn't seem to be affected at all. So, it's the good fortune treasured robe. Is this why you dare to come out and fight me? The Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. His eyes were filled with endless killing intent. Just a pair of eyes alone could scare people to death. How would I dare to come up to Liangshan without a third? It's time for you to end your misdeeds. This is not a place where you should stay, or else I will let you know what is called the wrath of heaven and man. Yi Shiwen walked calmly in the sky, approaching the Chaos Overlord step by step, without the slightest fear. Wrath of heaven and man? Humph, you want to fight me with just a good fortune treasured robe? I think you're too naive. Even if I'm not in my peak state, I'm not someone you can compete with now. The Chaos Overlord didn't care at all. Is that so? Yi Shiwen sneered. He raised his hand, and in an instant, the sky and earth changed color, and a boundless wave of air swept out. This wave of air was only one of them. Countless waves of air between heaven and earth condensed at this moment, and the aura of the mortal world was like a Milky Way manifesting above the entire divine capital of fortune. It vaguely turned into a giant dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, staring at the Chaos Overlord. The terrifying giant dragon manifested, and in an instant, all the creatures in the entire divine capital of fortune felt a faint pressure in their hearts, but there was no sense of oppression. The target of this giant dragon was only the Chaos Overlord. The Chaos Overlord suddenly felt a terrifying pressure. At this moment, he really felt the feeling that Yi Shiwen had felt before. Rejected by heaven and earth, and the world was hostile to you. What kind of feeling was that? It was as if you were in a strange environment, with no friends and family, and everyone was pointing a knife at you, ready to stab you to death at any time. This is the destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. You've only been the Eastern Heavenly Lord for a few years, but you can actually manifest the destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. Young man, you're really amazing. The Chaos Overlord was experienced and knowledgeable, and could be called an old monster. He immediately recognized that the energy dragon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws was the destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. Destiny was something that could not be seen or touched, but it truly existed. Like heaven's will, it was a combination of the will of all the creatures in the Fortune God dynasty. The stronger the Fortune God dynasty, the stronger its destiny. The stronger the destiny, the stronger it could affect the strength of the Fortune God dynasty. Just like no one could resist heaven's will, no one could withstand the attack of the Fortune God dynasty's destiny. Even a half-step sovereign realm expert would be seriously injured, or even die. This was the Fortune God dynasty's countless years of accumulation of people's will. No one could resist it. Although the current Fortune God dynasty could not be compared to its peak, its destiny was still terrifying. This was also one of the Fortune God dynasty's final trump cards. Let alone a half-step sovereign realm expert, even a sovereign realm expert would be seriously injured by this attack. This was the self-defense method of every era. Otherwise, how could those eras resist the vicious hands of those ancient eras that were like wolves and tigers? The Chaos Overlord certainly knew how terrifying the Fortune God dynasty's destiny was, but he couldn't figure out how Yi Shiwen could condense the Fortune God dynasty's destiny in one fell swoop after becoming the Eastern Heavenly Lord for such a short period of time. The reason why ordinary heavenly venerables couldn't compete with the Great Supremes was because the Great Supremes were chosen by heaven's will. They had the Fortune God dynasty's destiny in their bodies. The longer they served as the Great Supremes, the richer their destiny would become, and they would receive various bonuses. Their rapid cultivation was just a side effect. Most importantly, they could summon the Fortune God dynasty's destiny at the critical moment to defeat any strong enemy. But to achieve this, one had to be the Great Supremes of the Fortune God dynasty for more than 1 billion years. As far as he knew, Yi Shiwen shouldn't have such a long time. Even Yi Shiwen's lifespan wasn't that long. No one in the entire Fortune God dynasty could achieve this. The last person he saw was a former Middle Heavenly Venerable. Fortune Heavenly Monarch naturally didn't count. At his level, he didn't need to rely on the Fortune God dynasty's destiny. Yi Shiwen smiled slightly. Under the contrast of the Fortune God dynasty's destiny, he was like the god of creation, the sole ruler of heaven and earth. With the degree of integration between him and the Fortune God dynasty, it was impossible to manifest the Fortune God dynasty's destiny and use it to attack the enemy. But it didn't mean that no one could do it. He did it by borrowing the Sword of Fate and the Fortune Treasure Robe. The former owners of these two supreme treasures could do this. He mobilized the Fortune God dynasty's destiny through the Sword of Fate and the Fortune Treasure Robe. Otherwise, it would be impossible. It should be the Fortune Treasure Robe. Young man, you do have wonderful ideas and some luck, but do you think you are invincible with the Fortune Treasure Robe? What kind of person was Chaos Overlord? He quickly figured out the crux of the matter. You summoned the Fortune God dynasty's destiny, but do you dare? Do you dare? Chapter 3755. Do you dare? The Chaos Overlord stood with his hands behind his back, looking at Yi Shiwen confidently, as if he didn't believe that Yi Shiwen would dare to attack the Fortune God dynasty's destiny. The Chaos Overlord was naturally confident. The Fortune God dynasty's destiny was indeed terrifying. Even half-step sovereign realm experts were severely injured or even killed by it. But every time it was used, it was very dangerous. The Fortune God dynasty's destiny couldn't manifest, so it was difficult to damage it. It was the same as Heaven's will. Since Heaven's will couldn't manifest, there was no way to kill it. But since it had manifested, there was a possibility of being severely injured. It was possible to injure half-step sovereigns, but half-step sovereigns were powerful existences. How could they not react? At that time, both sides would most likely suffer heavy injuries. Therefore, this might be used as a last resort as a deterrent, but it couldn't be used. He was certain of this point. If the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein was damaged, the consequences would be unimaginable. With the protection of the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein, the Fortune Divine Dynasty could enjoy a smooth sailing, but if the Fortune Divine Dynasty's luck was damaged, it would immediately affect the Fortune Divine Dynasty, causing all kinds of disasters to erupt. Countless lives would be lost in an instant. In the distant past, this was very normal. It was an era where foreign lifeforms ran amok. However, after Fortune Heavenly Monarch established the Fortune Divine Dynasty, he used the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty's destiny to suppress the Fortune world, causing the probability of such disasters to decrease and become more and more peaceful. But it didn't mean that those disasters didn't exist anymore. They were just suppressed by the Fortune God Dynasty's destiny. Once an accident happened, the Fortune God Dynasty would be the first to suffer. And if the Fortune God Dynasty suffered a heavy blow, the Supremes would also be weakened. This was the price of being tied to the Fortune God Dynasty. Do you think I don't dare? Yi Shiwen asked indifferently, approaching the Chaos Overlord step by step. Behind him, the Fortune God Dynasty's dragon vein became more and more solid. In the beginning, it was only an illusory shadow, but in the end, one could see its scales and claws clearly. This was the public opinion of the Fortune God Dynasty moving towards Yi Shiwen. The reappearance of the Chaos Overlord had already caused panic in the Fortune God Dynasty. Now that Yi Shiwen had stepped forward, he naturally became the core of the entire Fortune God Dynasty. Naturally, the destiny of the Fortune God Dynasty would gather towards him. This process was very fast, and the effect was very obvious. One strike and I can kill you. Yi Shiwen grinned, revealing his snow-white teeth. There was a mischievous look on his face. You wouldn't dare. Primal Chaos Overlord glared at him. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't dare, but since you've forced me to this point, do I have a choice? Anyway, I'm going to die either way, so what's the big deal if I drag one of them down with me? Yi Shiwen had an indifferent look on his face. This also made the Chaos Overlord a little silent. Under normal circumstances, Yi Shiwen really wouldn't dare. However, as he said, he had been forced to this point. It was nothing more than a matter of how he died. What was the difference? Putting himself in their shoes, if it were him, he wouldn't let himself have an easy time either. Moreover, even if the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein heavily injured and killed him, the Fortune Divine Dynasty might not necessarily perish. It would only suffer heavy injuries, and all kinds of troubles would be unavoidable. However, the Fortune Divine Dynasty wouldn't fall, and it would only decline further. Such a price was undoubtedly too small compared to death. It was even more so for a person like Yi Shiwen. You wouldn't dare, Primal Chaos Overlord said. He was still confident and domineering. Even if you make a move, you can't kill me. He knew what Yi Shiwen said just now. Using the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein to attack him was just a threat. However, such a threat would only become a reality in the end if he was really forced into a corner. Unfortunately, he had no way to deal with it. He didn't have the corresponding means because the outer domain was in a state of disunity. It was impossible to condense a terrifying existence like the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein. I can't kill you? Actually, you can try. Yi Shiwen was still smiling, but then his body slightly swayed, and the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein condensed behind him disappeared without a trace in an instant. But you're right about one thing. I wouldn't dare. For you alone, I'm putting people in an abyss of misery and suffering. However, it doesn't mean that I can't deal with you. Primal Chaos Overlord, do you dare to fight in the chaos? Let me see how many people were able to contend with the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch back then. Yi Shiwen said, and there was a hint of excitement in his expression. His goal had never been as simple as becoming a middle heavenly master of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. His goal had always been to become a powerful ruler-level figure like the Fortune Divine Monarch. Therefore, he was also very interested in the Primal Chaos Overlord. Not long ago, he was a figure that he couldn't even look up to, but now, he was a measuring stick to test the results of his cultivation. And the Primal Chaos Overlord naturally saw through Yi Shiwen's undisguised purpose, and his heart was filled with anger. What kind of figure was he? Now, he had become a measuring stick for Yi Shiwen to measure himself against. Arrogant boy, you will pay the price. The Primal Chaos Overlord's voice became calmer, but everyone knew that his killing intent would only become stronger and stronger. He couldn't wait to tear Yi Shiwen into pieces. Let's go, Yi Shiwen said. Yi Shiwen took a step and directly stepped into the chaos. And after him, the Primal Chaos Overlord also followed him into the chaos, not intending to fight in the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Otherwise, even if Yi Shiwen didn't take the initiative to draw out the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein of destiny, he might automatically appear. That would be the most troublesome. You're really arrogant. I will make you understand that compared to a true half-step ruler, your meager strength is nothing. The Primal Chaos Overlord said coldly. Whether I'm a match or not, you'll know once you try. Yi Shiwen sneered. Boom! There was a terrifying explosion, and the overwhelming power of the Primal Chaos Overlord boiled. The monstrous and terrifying aura not only far exceeded the level of a peak heavenly master, but it even shook the entire Fortune realm. The entire Fortune realm could sense the existence of this terrifying aura. All of a sudden, the heavenly masters in the Fortune realm were alarmed, and they all rushed out of the Fortune realm and into the chaos. It wasn't just the heavenly masters of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, but even the heavenly masters of the other domains. All of them were alarmed by this terrifying aura. Only a half-step sovereign realm expert would be able to envelop the entire Fortune world with his aura. Yi Shiwen's previous battle with a peak Heavenly Master had only alarmed the Heavenly Masters of one domain, and it wouldn't affect those further away. The gap between the two sides was obvious. That's the primal Chaos Overlord. A Heavenly Master of the Fortune Divine Dynasty saw the primal Chaos Overlord, and he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. In the center of that raging wave, a person with seemingly world-destroying power stood between heaven and earth. In the face of this power, even a peak Heavenly Master was too insignificant. Although Yi Shiwen was also very strong, and even far surpassed a peak Heavenly Master, he was still a little bit inferior. Therefore, it gave people a feeling of subconsciously ignoring it, and the Heavenly Masters of the Fortune Divine Dynasty cursed inwardly. The primal Chaos Overlord's terrifying strength was definitely not a good thing for the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty. All these years, the Fortune Divine Dynasty had been able to hang around and beat the foreign domains, to a large extent, because the foreign domains didn't have a backbone, but with the reappearance of the primal Chaos Overlord, everything would be different. What was more frightening was that this was happening at a time when the Fortune Divine Dynasty was in a precarious situation, adding snow to snow. Its Lord Primal Chaos Overlord. Unlike the people of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, when the foreign domain's Heavenly Masters saw the Primal Chaos Overlord, a small portion of them revealed a surprised expression, but most of them were frowning. Different from the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the foreign domains had more than one half-step sovereign expert. Even the Primal Chaos Overlord couldn't dominate the world in the past, and could only be said to be on equal footing with those few experts. And these people also belonged to those few experts' forces, but those experts were later defeated and killed by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, leaving only the Primal Chaos Overlord. In the hearts of these people, they probably didn't welcome the return of the Primal Chaos Overlord. It had been too long since they had submitted to others, and they had almost forgotten this feeling. Moreover, although they all belonged to the foreign domains, the foreign domains were just a geographical term. In fact, they had never belonged to the same force. It was just that under the pressure of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, they had reluctantly joined forces to resist the Fortune Divine Dynasty. In the past, when they belonged to different half-step sovereign experts, they had also fought against each other, resulting in countless deaths and injuries. The hatred between them was no less than the hatred between them and the Fortune Divine Dynasty. It was just that the Fortune Heavenly Monarch's performance was too strong. Thus, they had no choice but to join forces. Now that the Primal Chaos Overlord had returned, it was probably not a good thing. The foreign domain's rules were completely different from the Fortune Divine Dynasties. The Fortune Divine Dynasty still had basic rules that restrained each other, and even a middle heavenly venerable couldn't really do as they pleased. But if the Primal Chaos Overlord returned, they had no other choice but to submit. Either submit or die. For a time, many heavenly venerables who rushed to the chaos space had mixed feelings, and all kinds of feelings rose in their hearts. But most of them probably didn't have any good thoughts about the Primal Chaos Overlord's return. The terrifying aura was like a raging tide, directly shrouding Yi Shiwen. The chaos space exploded, and Yi Shiwen was like a small boat in a raging tide, on the verge of capsizing at any time. Previously, the Primal Chaos Overlord had used to deprive Yi Shiwen of all his laws, but after discovering that Yi Shiwen had the Good Fortune treasure robe to protect him, he discovered that this method of bullying ordinary peak heavenly venerables was no longer effective. The only way was to suppress Yi Shiwen with absolute strength. The chaos space trembled violently, torn apart by a terrifying force. Chapter 3756. A terrifyingly powerful force erupted in an instant. At this moment, Yi Shiwen took the initiative to move. He let out a long roar that shook the entire chaos. His entire body was emitting the radiance of the 3,000 martial arts laws. All kinds of immortal lights scattered in the chaos like rain, showing off his strength. Many heavenly masters who were watching the battle at the edge of the chaos couldn't help but gasp when they saw this scene. This was also a tough guy. Obviously, his strength was far beyond ordinary peak heavenly masters. He wasn't someone that ordinary people could compare with. Swish! Yi Shiwen's figure disappeared, and a dragon rose and a phoenix fell. In an instant, he had already rushed to the front of the Chaos Overlord. A huge crack appeared in the aura of the Chaos Overlord, and the chaos was smashed by Yi Shiwen's rampage. Heaven and earth were torn apart and the galaxy turned into powder. The horror here was unimaginable. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen blasted out a punch. In an instant, a huge 6 paths of reincarnation wheel appeared behind him. This huge 6 paths of reincarnation wheel rotated continuously. Every time it rotated, a terrifying force would enter Yi Shiwen's arms. This punch penetrated everything and directly blasted in front of the Chaos Overlord. Not bad. This punch still has room for development. The true meaning of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist is in line with the cycle of heaven and earth. It's indeed amazing, but you're too weak. The Chaos Overlord opened his eyes. In an instant, countless rays of light emerged from the chaos. The laws were forced into rays of light by the Chaos Overlord, and they turned into a huge cage that instantly locked Yi Shiwen and imprisoned him. At this moment, the Chaos Overlord finally made his move. A spear had appeared in his hand. This spear traversed the entire universe, and it was full of traces of weathering time. There were even many cracks and potholes on it. Each crack and pothole represented an earth-shattering battle. However, this spear didn't weaken. On the contrary, it only made it stronger. Blood dripped down drop by drop. Each drop of blood contained a world-shaking aura, like a vast ocean. It was unknown just how many peerless experts' blood this spear had drunk. This spear slowly cut through the chaos. It seemed slow, and everyone could see it. However, it seemed slow, but it was actually fast. In an instant, it had already approached Yi Shiwen's forehead, and was about to blast Yi Shiwen's head into pieces. Yi Shiwen was imprisoned in this cage of principles. He wanted to retreat, but there was no way at all. All the principles were ineffective. Within this range, the Chaos Overlord was the true ruler of the world. Boom! This spear eventually bombarded Yi Shiwen's head, but it was only 3 inches in front of him, and couldn't advance any further. Around Yi Shiwen's body, the good fortune treasured robe appeared again, emitting good fortune immortal light that illuminated the entire chaos. At this moment, Yi Shiwen was like the good fortune heaven lord in the past. Yi Shiwen's eyes flickered with a terrifying light. The good fortune treasured robe was indeed powerful, and it could block the Chaos Overlord's attack. However, at the same time, its consumption was terrifying. Just to block this attack, 1/10 of the king-level dragon vein disappeared without a trace. It was directly consumed in an instant. Apart from a behemoth like the Fortune God dynasty, who could use the good fortune treasured robe, it didn't seem like the consumption was exaggerated, but the Chaos Overlord could launch such an attack thousands of times in an instant. This was the most terrifying aspect. With the good fortune treasured robe, Yi Shiwen had the strength to fight against a half-step ruler, but that was all. However, just when the good fortune treasured robe appeared to block the Chaos Overlord's attack, Yi Shiwen's body just swayed slightly, and he stabilized his figure, and then instantly attacked again. A blazing light shone between heaven and earth. Yi Shiwen spread his hands like 2 giant dragons, and in an instant, he had already torn the law cage in front of him into pieces. Even if you deprive me of my control over the law, I can still kill you. Yi Shiwen roared, and already appeared in front of the Chaos Overlord. You overestimate yourself, you're courting death. The corner of the Chaos Overlord's mouth twitched slightly, and he didn't take Yi Shiwen seriously at all. Yi Shiwen had the protection of the good fortune treasured robe, which was like a tortoise shell that was difficult to penetrate. However, in his eyes, Yi Shiwen's attack was nothing. Yi Shiwen's attack couldn't harm his main body. Unless Yi Shiwen used the Fortune God Dynasty's dragon vein, he had nothing to fear. But now, it seemed like Yi Shiwen wasn't ready to perish together with him. Entering the chaos was also one of his plans. In the Fortune God Dynasty, Yi Shiwen could use the Fortune God Dynasty's dragon vein, but in the chaos it was another matter. Yi Shiwen's attack arrived in front of the Chaos Overlord. The fist energy of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was peeled off layer by layer. It was like the outer shell was peeled off layer by layer. All that was left was Yi Shiwen's simple fist. Boom! This punch directly blasted 3 inches in front of the Chaos Overlord, and it stopped, unable to go any further. You overestimate yourself. Do you think your attack can hurt me? With just the good fortune treasured robe? The Chaos Overlord sneered and was about to attack. Suddenly, a strange phenomenon appeared behind Yi Shiwen. An incomparably huge and long river appeared in front of everyone. This long river was not flowing with water, but the fate of everyone. The fate of countless creatures in the world all flowed in it. Only by cutting off the existence of the long river of fate could one get rid of the shackles of the long river of fate. What is this? The Chaos Overlord realized something was wrong almost instantly, but it was too late. He was too confident, so he let Yi Shiwen get too close. Originally, this distance was also absolutely safe for him. Even if Yi Shiwen attacked in front of him, what could he do? It was impossible for Yi Shiwen to hurt him. However, now he realized something was wrong. Unknowingly, a sword appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand. This sword directly turned into the long river of fate, and it slashed down fiercely. Slash the heavens and earth! Yi Shiwen shouted, and a terrifying power erupted in an instant. The blazing light drowned everything, and the chaos was shocked. Many celestial venerables saw this scene, and not one of them didn't suck in a breath of cold air. Even the creatures in the Fortune realm were affected, and none of them didn't tremble. This kind of attack was too terrifying. This was the 3 swords of fate. The tool spirit of the Sword of Fate had forced Yi Shiwen into a difficult situation by relying on the strike the heaven and earth. So, Yi Shiwen had used it now. Its might was even more horrifying. Boom! The sword landed heavily on the Chaos Overlord's body. In an instant, a flower of blood bloomed and a huge bloody gash appeared on the Chaos Overlord's chest. Endless golden blood followed closely behind, directly splashing out and falling into the chaos, directly blasting many holes in the chaos. The blood of a half-step sovereign-level expert was too heavy and too terrifying. Puff! The Chaos Overlord spat out a mouthful of blood, and then he was sent flying. His whole body was like a meteor, directly tearing a huge crack in the universe. How is this possible? This is the Sword of Fate! The Chaos Overlord immediately recognized the sword in Yi Shiwen's hand. He was all too familiar with it. Although the person who sealed him was Fortune Creation Heaven Lord, he had tried to escape in those long years, and at that time, he was suppressed by the Middle Heavenly Master several times. Naturally, he had a deep impression of the former Middle Heavenly Master's Sword of Fate. Compared to the older generation, the former Middle Heavenly Master could only be considered a rising star. After the Fortune God Dynasty was established, and after Fortune Creation Heaven Lord broke through to the Supreme Realm, he broke through to the half-step Sovereign Realm. Even so, he did not dare to underestimate the former Middle Heavenly Master. No one dared to underestimate an expert who could step into the half-step Sovereign Realm. No matter how he stepped into this realm, it was extraordinary, powerful, and terrifying. At this time, he finally understood where Yi Shiwen's confidence came from. He actually dared to fight with him in the universe's chaos. The Sword of Fate was used for attack, and the Fortune Creation Treasure Robe was used for defense. This lineup was simply shocking. It was as if 2 great heavenly masters were attacking him at the same time. If he was prepared and at his peak, even with the Sword of Fate, it would be impossible to seriously injure him. However, after all, he was not at his peak, and he was unprepared. He did not expect that Yi Shiwen had already subdued the Sword of Fate. This was why he was caught off guard and suffered a big loss. He tried to stabilize his body in the process of flying backward, and even directly stopped himself. All of this seemed to take a long time, but in fact, it only took a moment. How could Yi Shiwen let go of this opportunity? It could be said that he was taking advantage of the Chaos Overlord. In an instant, Yi Shiwen appeared in front of the Chaos Overlord again, and the Sword of Fate in his hand was waved again. In an instant, countless strange phenomena appeared again, and the River of Fate appeared again. In an instant, it turned into a terrifying attack, and in an instant, it drowned the Chaos Overlord. The Chaos Overlord was caught off guard, or rather, he had no time to defend at all. At this time, the consequences of Yi Shiwen taking the initiative completely erupted, and he had no chance to resist at all. Boom! The Chaos Overlord flew backward at an even more astonishing speed, and spat out another mouthful of blood. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere, and bone fragments flew everywhere. Under this blow, he completely suffered a big loss. Chapter 37:57. The Sword of Destiny swept out twice, and both swords directly hit the Chaos Overlord's body. It wasn't that the Chaos Overlord didn't have the ability to resist, but when Yi Shiwen took the initiative to seize the initiative, the strength advantage that he originally had was completely reversed. He couldn't exert the power at all. Boom! 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 After this move succeeded again, Yi Shiwen crazily performed a series of Sword of Destinies cleaving heaven and earth. The terrifying sword Chi Frenzy directly surrounded the Chaos Overlord, drowning everything, including the entire chaos. Even the entire scope of the sword light expanded all the way to the edge of the entire chaos. The celestial masters at the edge of the chaos also retreated. The terrifying sword light only swept a little bit, but it made them want to vomit blood. Boom! There was another huge roar, and the Chaos Overlord that was shrouded in the sword light finally let out a huge roar. A figure penetrated through everything and flew out. He was covered in blood. Golden blood was sprinkled in the chaos, and bone fragments were flying everywhere. It was extremely tragic. Everyone took a closer look. Who else could it be but the Chaos Overlord? Many celestial masters took a deep breath. They couldn't believe it. Although they could roughly guess what kind of scene it would be when Yi Shiwen's series of cleaving heaven and earth slashed down, they still couldn't help but take a deep breath when they saw this scene. However, Chaos Overlord was no longer as carefree as before. His body was already covered with dense scales, and he withstood Yi Shiwen's Sword of Fate that was slashing down. For him, it was also a great injury, and he even faintly revealed his original form. Of course, everyone knew that the Chaos Overlord was not a human. It was impossible for him to have a human form. He just maintained a human form. His original body was said to be a chaos beast. From the moment he was born, he stirred up the world. He could be regarded as the best among the innate gods. But no one had ever seen his original form, and now he was actually forced to this point by Yi Shiwen. It was conceivable how urgent the situation he encountered was. Huff, huff, huff. The Chaos Overlord was constantly panting. Every time he panted, his aura recovered a little. It didn't take long for him to recover. The scales on his body also receded. On the other side, Yi Shiwen finally revealed himself. He held the Sword of Fate in his hand, and his aura was a bit thicker. The continuous use of the Sword of Fate had consumed a lot of his strength. Although activating the Sword of Destiny mainly consumed the energy sphere in his body, this series of consumption was also huge for him. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be slightly surprised. A half-step sovereign lord like the Chaotic Overlord could recover so quickly. His vitality was so tenacious that it far surpassed any peak heavenly venerable he knew. If this series of attacks had landed on a middle heavenly venerate, it would have been enough to kill him. However, when it landed on the Chaos Overlord, it only seriously injured him. Moreover, he had already recovered in a short time. It was far more terrifying than a peak Heavenly Venerable's recovery ability. One had to know that this series of attacks had consumed an energy ball and the energy of dozens of king-class dragon veins. The Sword of Fate was indeed powerful, but the consumption was too great. Unless he could replenish it at any time and place near the Fortune Divine Capital, he wouldn't be able to sustain such consumption. Apart from the Fate creation Heavenly Lord, you're the only one who's managed to force me to this extent. The Chaos Overlord stared at Yi Shiwen as a cruel smile flashed across his lips. Even he couldn't withstand the series of attacks just now. Every attack of cutting the heavens and earth was equivalent to a full-force attack from a half-step sovereign expert. He couldn't underestimate it. It's a pity. If it was his original master, this series of attacks might really have seriously injured me. I wouldn't have been able to recover or even killed. But you're still a little lacking, the Chaos Overlord said. This time, I came out thinking that I was invincible in the world. I didn't expect someone like you to exist. It's just the right time to kill you. And how many times can you withstand such attacks? The Chaos Overlord grinned. His smile was full of killing intent. It was extremely terrifying. It's enough to kill you. You don't need to pretend that nothing has happened. You recover quickly, but you're not in your peak state. How much did you pay to recover so quickly? Yi Shiwen looked at him and said without the slightest bit of fear. Yi Shiwen didn't believe that the Chaos Overlord was as relaxed as he appeared. Everything in the world had to abide by the rules. It was impossible to do anything without paying a price. He had used cutting the heavens and earth many times thanks to the energy ball in his body. Otherwise, he would have exhausted all his spiritual power after using it twice. 3 Swords of Fate. This is just cutting the heavens and earth. What about cutting the chaos and cutting the fate? Why don't you use it? The Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen and said, It's enough to deal with you. But I won't kill you today. I have more important things to do than killing you, Yi Shiwen said lightly. He didn't want to kill the Chaos Overlord completely. Normally, he wouldn't let go of such a great threat. Even if he had to pay a huge price, he wouldn't be lenient. He would kill the Chaos Overlord while he wasn't at his peak. What fair fight? That depended on the situation. However, it was different now. The experts of the ancient epoch could appear at any time. Every half-step ruler expert that appeared in the martial epoch was crucial to the martial epoch. Yi Shiwen wasn't confident of dealing with the sneak attacks of so many antiques from the ancient epoch. Furthermore, he felt that things were not that simple this time. This was especially so after the appearance of the half-step ruler half-moon immortal lord of this epoch. It made him feel that things were not as simple as he had imagined. Was this really just those antiques trying to save themselves? Perhaps, but that was definitely not the whole truth. Furthermore, if he raised his cultivation to the peak for the sake of killing the Chaos Overlord, he might not succeed even if he paid a huge price. The earlier series of attacks already showed how difficult it was to kill a half-step ruler. He was only confident of success if he reached the 9th realm. You won't kill me? Ha 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 ha. The Chaos Overlord laughed maniacally, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. You won't kill me, but I will kill you. The Chaos Overlord's entire body was filled with murderous intent, becoming extremely dangerous. The earlier series of battles had thoroughly enraged him. Yi Shiwen even said that he wouldn't kill him. To the Chaos Overlord, this was a great humiliation. Boom. The Chaos Overlord didn't intend to stop the battle at all. On the contrary, it directly pounced on Yi Shiwen like a prehistoric giant beast, crashing and crashing. The Chaos Overlord's physical body was far stronger than Yi Shiwen's. Hence, he had no fear. Even the weakest half-step ruler was several times stronger than a peak Heavenly Venerate. Boundless brilliant light splashed out, and the laws blasted out like waves. The entire primal chaos was annihilated. Destruction was the main theme of all this. Stubborn fool! Yi Shiwen snorted coldly, and a terrifying light burst out of his eyes. He also sublimated his own aura, completely integrating himself with the good fortune treasure robe. Soon, the power of the good fortune treasure robe erupted, and he integrated it into one. Yi Shiwen held the sword of destiny in his hand, and directly charged at the Chaos Overlord. Since you don't want to retreat, then I will kill my way to the place where you retreat. The two were like two terrifying chaotic storms, colliding fiercely in the entire primal chaos. However, this was just the beginning. Two terrifying and violent figures constantly collided in the primal chaos. Every time they collided, it set off a terrifying frenzy in the primal chaos, causing the primal chaos to collapse with a monstrous force. Such an attack seemed to be even more terrifying than before, especially for many heavenly venerates. Previously, Yi Shiwen's slash the heavens and earth was like a storm. Although it was terrifying, he was the only one attacking. But now, the two of them erupted together. Yi Shiwen could no longer find such a good opportunity to ruthlessly release a wave of slash the heavens and earth. After suffering a loss once, it was obvious that the Chaos Overlord would not give Yi Shiwen such an opportunity again. Hence, towards the end of the battle, it was almost the simplest and most direct collision, using their tyrannical strength to fight. The Chaos Overlord was incomparably violent, as if he could suppress the entire primal chaos by himself. The primal chaos creatures within countless miles did not dare to approach him at all, as if they were frightened. Yi Shiwen was wearing the good fortune treasure robe, and the sword of destiny in his hand was not inferior in any way. Vaguely, it seemed as if two great supremes were possessing him, and his divine bravery was unstoppable. Neither of them could be considered a true battle between half-step sovereigns. The Chaos Overlord was no longer at its peak, and Yi Shiwen's combat power had increased temporarily with the help of two supreme treasures. However, many heavenly venerates were already dumbfounded. If they were in such a battle, they would almost be sending themselves to their deaths directly. No one knew how long this battle would last. It might be 1,000 years or even 10,000 years, but everyone also knew that it would not last long. Both of them were not in normal conditions, so it was destined that it would not be a protracted battle. As if responding to everyone's thoughts, the two figures crisscrossed and exploded the primal chaos. Both of them were a little embarrassed, and they were constantly panting. In comparison, Yi Shiwen was obviously in a much better state. The good fortune treasure robe was firmly protecting him. Unless the energy balls on his body were exhausted, he would be fine. On the other hand, the Chaos Overlord was in a much more embarrassing state. There were many injuries on his body. Although they were not serious, it was already shocking to him. How about it? Do you want to continue fighting? Chapter 3758. How about it? Do you want to continue? Yi Shiwen looked at the Chaos Overlord opposite him. The Chaos Overlord stared at Yi Shiwen. In the series of battles just now, he did not gain any upper hand. In the beginning, he underestimated Yi Shiwen. As a result, he suffered a huge loss. If that could be explained as an accident, he did not gain much advantage in the subsequent battles. Yi Shiwen wore the good fortune treasure robe and held the sword of destiny in his hand. It was very difficult to injure him seriously. Unless the resources on his body were exhausted, it was difficult to hurt Yi Shiwen. In particular, the good fortune treasure robe was the Tao tool of the Fate Heaven Lord. How could he not know this? He had fought with the Fate Heaven Lord many times, so he naturally knew the power of the good fortune treasure robe. In particular, Yi Shiwen forced the good fortune treasure robe to the extreme at all costs. It made him feel like he was wearing a tortoise shell. If that was all, it would be fine. However, Yi Shiwen had the sword of destiny in his hand, which had the strength to hurt him. Most importantly, he was not at his peak state. He had been suppressed for too long, and his vitality was really injured. Although he knew that Yi Shiwen was only relying on external forces now, it was indeed not something that he could take down. Although he hated Yi Shiwen, he also knew that there would be no result if he continued to fight. He could not kill Yi Shiwen. On the other hand, although Yi Shiwen could cause some damage to him, he could not kill him. If he really fought to the death, the final result was likely to be a lose-lose situation. Humph! The Chaos Overlord snorted coldly. He glanced at Yi Shiwen, took a step forward, and left the chaos. The direction he left was the direction of the outer domain, not the Fortune God dynasty. Because he knew that if he continued to cause trouble in the Fortune God capital, he was afraid that the Fortune God dynasty's dragon vein would really attack him. Yi Shiwen breathed a sigh of relief. He finally forced the Chaos Overlord to retreat. This was also part of his plan. He wanted to fight with the Chaos Overlord as soon as he arrived, so that the Chaos Overlord could face his strength. He would not underestimate him, so there would be room for cooperation against the ancient era's half-step sovereign-level masters. As the saying goes, dragons don't live with snakes. How could an eagle cooperate with an ant? Only by displaying sufficient strength would he have the possibility of cooperating with the primal Chaos Overlord. As far as Yi Shiwen was concerned, this battle was the realization of his own plan. Everything was under his control and rhythm from the beginning to the end. As for the surrounding heavenly venerables, they were a little dumbfounded. They were well aware of how deadly the primal Chaos Overlord was. He could be said to be the strongest person in the world, especially when the Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord and the former Middle Celestial Lord had already disappeared. Originally, they thought that no one could stop the current Chaos Overlord. Who knew that Yi Shiwen could actually stop the Chaos Overlord? Moreover, he wasn't just barely stopping the primal Chaos Overlord. Instead, he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. In fact, he was even able to catch the primal Chaos Overlord off guard and beat him up. Although the primal Chaos Overlord wasn't at his peak, and Yi Shiwen also borrowed external forces, there was no doubt that Yi Shiwen's combat strength had truly reached that realm. For the experts of the outer domain, the appearance of two half-step sovereign-level masters was undoubtedly not good news. Whether they appeared in the Fortune God dynasty or the outer domain, unless that person was themselves, it couldn't be considered good news. As for the heavenly venerables of the Fortune God dynasty, they were undoubtedly excited. Yi Shiwen's combat strength had soared to that realm, which was good news for the entire Fortune God dynasty, especially in the situation where the Doomsday battle was imminent. It was just that the current Middle Celestial Lord should be the leader, and he was the Vice-Emperor of the Fortune God dynasty. However, Yi Shiwen had clearly surpassed the Middle Celestial Lord. From all aspects, it was impossible for him to be inferior to others. At that time, both sides would inevitably have a fierce battle. But no matter what, that was a matter for the future. Now, the stronger Yi Shiwen was, the more confident they were. The news that Yi Shiwen had fought to a draw with the primal Chaos Overlord soon spread throughout the Fortune God dynasty, the outer domain, and even the epic battlefield with the return of the heavenly venerables. Everyone was incomparably shocked. Another peerless master was slowly rising. At the same time, everyone was also caught unprepared. Yi Shiwen's speed of advancement was too fast. He had only been a heavenly venerable for tens of thousands of years, but now he had ascended all the way. Not only did he become an Eastern heavenly venerable, but now he could even fight to a draw with the primal Chaos Overlord. Even the Fate Creation Heavenly Monarch back then couldn't compare to this speed of ascension. Many people were watching. Perhaps after the Fate Creation Heavenly Monarch, there would be another sovereign-level master. Although there had never been a situation where two sovereign-level masters appeared in an era since ancient times, Yi Shiwen might have the opportunity to break this rule. With the announcement of Yi Shiwen's battle, the power of the human clan became stronger and stronger. Everyone knew that Yi Shiwen was from the human clan, and he usually supported the human clan. Therefore, the human clan could be considered to have completely stabilized their newly acquired territory. Moreover, from time to time, experts from all over the world would come to join them. Everyone knew that Yi Shiwen was like the sun in the sky, and his future achievements would be unimaginable. Perhaps, he could become the next fate creation heavenly monarch. If such a day really came, they would become the future heroes of the fate creation heavenly monarch. Back then, there were so many experts who followed the fate creation heavenly monarch. Later on, which one of them didn't become famous and top experts in the world? If Yi Shiwen was successful, they could also ascend to heaven with him. Moreover, with the passage of time, the matter of the possible world-ending battle began to gradually become known. In such a world-ending battle, it was almost impossible for them to have the strength to protect themselves. They could only rely on a matchless powerhouse. Currently, the two biggest thighs of the entire fate domain were the chaotic overlord. It was a foreign creature, and the hatred between them was as deep as the sea. Obviously, it was impossible to rely on the chaotic overlord. Therefore, there weren't many options left for them, and that was to rely on Yi Shiwen. Therefore, after this battle, all kinds of experts suddenly joined the human clan. However, at this time, the human clan began to choose according to Yi Shiwen's instructions. It was better to have nothing than to have someone of inferior quality. If the human clan wanted to develop and grow, it was indeed the best and fastest way to absorb these experts in a short period of time. However, they couldn't leave behind any hidden dangers. Although Yi Shiwen was in charge, and no hidden dangers could turn the sky upside down, but it was impossible to recruit just anyone. In addition to the human clan, the Eastern Heavenly Venerate residence was also a boiling cauldron of voices. The number of people coming and going was simply uncountable. All of them wanted to become subordinates of the Eastern Heavenly Venerate residence and serve the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Yi Shiwen. Not only were there sovereign emperors and quasi-emperors from small sects, but there were also many Heavenly Venerate. They also sent their disciples to the Eastern Heavenly Venerate residence to serve the Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Some even personally came to the Eastern Heavenly Venerate to recommend themselves. All of this changed after this battle. Previously, when Yi Shiwen succeeded as the Eastern Heavenly Venerate, not many people recognized him at all. He only held the title of the Eastern Heavenly Venerate of the Fortune God dynasty. In fact, it couldn't be considered as a true title. There were also many people who didn't accept him on the surface. However, with the end of this battle, everything changed. Obviously, Yi Shiwen had become the strongest person in the entire Fortune God dynasty. Not to mention the Eastern Heavenly Venerate, even if he wanted to become a Middle Heavenly Venerate, it was more than enough. It could be said that in the current Fortune God dynasty, no one could stop Yi Shiwen's footstep. Under such circumstances, if they still didn't know what was good for them, then the consequences were obvious. If Yi Shiwen caught them where it hurt, even if they were killed, no one would stand up for them. Moreover, it wasn't just the eastern region. Even the western region, northern region, southern region, and even the 10 great divine cities, which were not under Yi Shiwen's jurisdiction, had heavenly venerates express their goodwill to Yi Shiwen. They expressed that they would listen to Yi Shiwen's instructions and fully prepare for the battle against the ancient era. In this battle, not only had Yi Shiwen realized his plan, but he had also displayed his might. He had let everyone in the world see his strength, and who was the current ruler of the Fortune God dynasty. Yi Shiwen didn't care about these mundane matters. He let Sword Master's avatar come out of seclusion to deal with them, while he himself focused on comprehending and waiting for the opportunity to break through. In fact, he could already break through to the 9th realm now, but he forcefully suppressed it because he knew that if he broke through to the 9th realm now, his combat strength would indeed increase tremendously, but it would still not be comparable to a half-step sovereign. It wouldn't be of much use to the overall situation of the war. He wanted to thoroughly comprehend the great Tao of the half-step sovereign realm. He wanted to extrapolate his 3,000 martial Daos to the half-step sovereign realm. At that time, he could directly consume the world tree fruit to break through, and his true battle prowess would naturally break through to the half-step sovereign realm. This step was very difficult, extremely difficult. It could even be said that it was a method that had never been done before or since. Once he succeeded, he would create history and dazzle the present. It wasn't that he didn't know how difficult it was, but he had no other choice. If he broke through to the ninth realm, he wouldn't have enough time and accumulation to break through to half-step sovereign. Time, to him, was the most pressing thing. In order to save time, he had to take this shortcut that was full of thorns. He might walk this path covered in blood, but he had no other choice. In his inner world, the world tree fruit had finally ripened, quietly waiting for Yi Shiwen to pick it, emitting a gentle light. His mysterious space was still continuously absorbing the spiritual energy from an energy ball, constantly deducing the great Tao of half-step sovereign of Yi Shiwen's 3,000 martial Tao. Everything was a race against time. Chapter 3759. Time was undoubtedly the most precious resource for the current Yi Shiwen. Even he could only wait patiently. While the Fortune God dynasty was in turmoil because of Yi Shiwen's battle, earth-shattering changes were also taking place in the outer domain. Originally, the outer domain could be said to be in a state of disunity because there was no leader like the Fortune God Heavenly Lord. After the Fortune God Heavenly Lord succeeded in ascending to the top, even the last half-step sovereign, the Chaos Overlord, was suppressed. They did not have a leader who could convince the masses. Therefore, they had to do things their own way, and the internal fighting was even crazier. The killings were far worse than within the Fortune God dynasty. But now, the situation was changed by the return of the Chaos Overlord. After the Chaos Overlord returned, he immediately set off a reign of terror. Compared to the Fortune God dynasty, there were no rules in the outer domain. Everything was decided by the person with the biggest fist. Now it was obvious that the Chaos Overlord was the group with the biggest fist. Therefore, as soon as he returned to the outer domain, he set off a reign of terror. He ordered all the heavenly venerables in the outer domain to come on a pilgrimage, regardless of what they were doing, whether they were in closed-door cultivation or not. Discuss important matters together. What important matters were discussed together? It was to establish an orderly Chaos God dynasty like the Fortune God dynasty. And he was like the Fortune God Heavenly Lord. In contrast, all the heavenly venerables would become high-ranking officials of the Chaos God dynasty. Everything was imitating the model of the Fortune God dynasty. In fact, the Fortune God dynasty had been running well for so many years. Although there were conflicts between the people and the Fortune God dynasty, it was controlled to an acceptable extent. Therefore, this was indeed a system that could be used as a reference. But in recent years, the foreign lands had already fallen apart, and the people's hearts were scattered. Even the Chaos Overlord couldn't make everyone obedient, unlike the Fortune Divine dynasty. The Fortune Divine dynasty itself had great authority, and it didn't matter who was in the position. Yi Shiwen could also gather all the heavenly venerables in the name of the Prime Minister of the Fortune God dynasty. This was a condition that the outer domain did not have. Moreover, unlike the Fortune Divine dynasty, the Fortune Divine dynasty was founded by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. Hence, the Fortune Divine dynasty was a single entity from the very beginning. On the other hand, the Fortune Divine dynasty was divided into several foreign half-step sovereigns. Although they had all fallen, the original structure had continued to this day. Therefore, there were many people who did not accept the primal Chaos Overlord. Originally, they might not have to confront the Chaos Overlord face to face. However, it was obvious that many people were thinking too much when Yi Shiwen fought the Chaos Overlord to a draw. In many people's opinion, Yi Shiwen was able to contend against the primal chaos overlord by relying on a supreme treasure left behind by a half-step sovereign. In fact, there were also supreme treasures of half-step sovereigns in the outer domain. For example, the blood-colored drumstick that had appeared during the siege of the Fortune Divine capital was one of them. This was especially true for the tribes that possessed the supreme treasures left behind by the half-step sovereign. Obviously, they were unwilling to accept the rule of the Chaos Overlord, because they were supreme existences in their respective territories, who would be willing to have another tyrannical Chaos Divine dynasty over their heads. For them, Yi Shiwen's previous battle had opened up a whole new domain. It turned out that they could also contend against a half-step sovereign by relying on the supreme treasures of half-step sovereigns. But soon, they discovered that something was wrong. After the Chaos Overlord returned to the outer domain, the first thing he did was to summon back his former subordinate. There were very few of those subordinates that had once followed him to conquer the world. After a long period of time, they had all withered and fallen. This was only at the level of Emperor Lords and Heavenly Venerables. As for the ordinary foreign lifeforms, they had already been replaced for many generations. But when he blew the horn, the imprints that had been branded in the bones of those foreign lifeforms and tribes were revived. These imprints of allegiance were passed down from generation to generation, and now, they finally heard the call of the Chaos Overlord again. Tyrannical foreign lifeforms were approaching the direction of the Chaos Overlord. Many people thought that the old antiques that had died had revived from the layers of dimensional spaces. They heard the summons from the soul level, and they couldn't refuse it. It didn't take long for a terrifying army to respond to the summons and gather under the Chaos Overlord's banner. After the original subordinates or the descendants of the original subordinates had arrived, the Chaos Overlord began to conquer the outer domain and punish those who didn't obey him. At first, the Fortune God dynasty thought that the Chaos Overlord intended to attack the Fortune God dynasty, and they immediately became nervous. Under such circumstances, if they still fought with the Chaos Overlord, there was no doubt that it would make things worse. But very quickly, they found out that the Chaos Overlord was punitive expedition against the foreign land's rebellious people. But after receiving this news, the people in the Fortune God dynasty did not feel any better. Because they were very clear that the Fortune God dynasty could suppress the outer domain with one hand and resist the invasion of the ancient era with the other. Even without the Fortune Heavenly Monarch and the former Middle Heavenly Master, they could still defend the territories that they had conquered before. To a large extent, it was because the outer domain didn't have a leader, and they couldn't unite as a rope like the Fortune God dynasty. But now, with the Chaos Overlord, the outer regions were like the Fortune God dynasty in the past with the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. They were able to unite all of their forces. Although it was inevitable that rivers of blood would flow in the midst of a crazy expedition, and it might seem that a large portion of the outer region's strength would be reduced, but in reality, the threat to the Fortune God dynasty would be greater because the outer regions would be unified. At that time, it would be very difficult to suppress the outer domain with one hand. But fortunately, at this critical time, Yi Shiwen appeared. Yi Shiwen presided over the Fortune God dynasty and could contend with the Chaos Overlord. At least, the Chaos Overlord wouldn't be that much of a threat. As the primal Chaos Overlord began his expedition, it quickly set off a reign of terror. This was especially true for the primal Chaos Overlord. He had been suppressed for all these years and was no longer at his peak. If he wanted to recover, the fastest way was to devour enough blood and flesh. It was impossible to start a massacre in the Fortune God dynasty. Obviously, with Yi Shiwen watching, it was impossible for the Chaos Overlord to succeed. In the Fortune God dynasty, there was also the heaven-defying means of the dragon vein, which was enough to put him to death. Therefore, he didn't dare to make a move. But the outer domain was different. The outer domain was full of forces that didn't submit, and it just so happened that he could kill all of them to replenish his origin. While conquering the forces that didn't submit, he could restore himself at the same time. This was a win-win choice for him. Under such circumstances, an earth-shattering reign of terror was born. Wherever the Chaos Overlord's army passed, tribes were uprooted one after another, and the entire tribe was slaughtered. Whether it was men, women, old or young, they were all killed. And these men, women, old, and young were all turned into the Chaos Overlord's blood, devoured by him. Every time he devoured tens of billions of lives, he became more tyrannical, and his vitality recovered more and more. His ferocious flames also became more and more ferocious. No one could stop him at all. Finally, such a tyrannical Chaos Overlord finally caused a collective panic among the major forces in the outer domain. As a result, several major forces in the outer domain finally gathered and formed an alliance. This alliance included the leaders of the major forces in the four outer domain. It could be said that 3/4 of the forces in the outer domain had gathered here to challenge the Chaos Overlord. And this war would also determine the situation of the entire outer domain. At the beginning, the alliance had an absolute advantage. Whether it was the number of troops or the number of experts, they completely had the upper hand, several times more than the Chaos Overlord's subordinate. But when the Chaos Overlord made his move, the situation was completely different. As soon as the Chaos Overlord made his move, in an instant, the sky and earth changed color, and the entire outer domain changed color. And on the side of the alliance, several peak heavenly masters stood out one after another, holding half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts, in an attempt to stop the Chaos Overlord's footsteps. But when they really fought, they realized that they were completely wrong. Even with half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts, they were not the Chaos Overlord's opponent at all. The Chaos Overlord's strength had clearly surpassed them, reaching another realm. Even if they had half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts in their hands, they wouldn't be able to stop Yi Shiwen at all. Forget about being able to beat the Chaos Overlord in the beginning like Yi Shiwen did. Later on, they would also be able to fight evenly with the Chaos Overlord. And they also held half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts, and they also had more half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts than Yi Shiwen. 4 half-step sovereign-level Tao artifacts exploded in the chaos at the same time, but even such a shocking lineup could not last a quarter of an hour in the hands of the Chaos Overlord. It was almost like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, defeating these peak heavenly masters. And now, they truly understood how much difference there was between them and the Eastern Heavenly Master Yi Shiwen of the Fortune God dynasty. It was almost like the difference between heaven and earth. Not everyone with a half-step sovereign-level Tao artifact could fight against it. Only in the hands of a half-step sovereign-level Tao artifact could exert its full power. Peak Heavenly Masters could not even exert 1/10 of its power. This was also the reason why the Chaos Overlord didn't take Yi Shiwen seriously in the beginning. Who knew that Yi Shiwen would be so fierce? He completely counterattacked, and completely broke out the power of the 2 supreme Tao tools. At this point, the world of the outer domain was decided in one battle. Chapter 3760. In this battle, the outcome of the outer domains was finally determined. The major forces of the outer domains were completely defeated. Without a leader, it was impossible for them to fight against the Chaos Overlord's army. However, what surprised everyone was that the Chaos Overlord didn't follow the tradition of the outer domains and annihilate these tribes and races. Even the peak heavenly venerables that opposed him didn't kill all of them. He only seriously injured them, forced them to admit defeat, and then let them go. Such an action immediately caused a great uproar, especially in the Fortune God dynasty. This was because the Chaos Overlord's actions undoubtedly reminded them of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. The Fortune Heavenly Monarch was also like this. The reason why the Fortune Heavenly Monarch was able to establish the Fortune God dynasty was not only because of his outstanding strength, but also because he broke the rule of bloody slaughter that was popular in the Fortune world. Only those forces that were willing to submit would be spared, and they would unite around him. This way, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's forces would grow stronger and stronger. This was the first time someone had formed a force that transcended tribes and regions, only accepting like-minded comrades who wanted to pacify this chaotic world. Many of the tribes that were loyal to the Fortune God dynasty were in fact the enemies of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch in the past. The outer realms had always lacked such ambitious and broad-minded people, so they had always been in a state of disunity. There was no way for them to unite. But now, after the Chaos Overlord came out, he obviously understood a lot of things. If they wanted to contend with the Fortune God dynasty, they could only have hope by uniting the outer domains. If they continued to be like a plate of loose sand and did things their own way, they would forever be beaten by the Fortune God dynasty. This was also the consensus of many of the outer domains experts, but even with this consensus, they couldn't do it to such an extent because there was a person who could convince the masses. Now that the Chaos Overlord appeared, this problem was completely solved. If that was the case, then the consequences would be unthinkable. For the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the appearance of such a terrifying colossus in the martial epoch was undoubtedly an incomparably huge threat. It could pose a fatal threat to them at any time. What happened after that was just as many people had expected. The worst situation happened. The Chaos Overlord established the Chaos Divine Dynasty, which was a distant rival to the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Although it was just a newly established dynasty, and many of its systems and personnel were not complete, just the list of famous alien races that were on it was enough to make people tremble in fear. When so many behemoths gathered together, it was already terrifying enough. Without a doubt, although the Chaos Divine Dynasty had just been established, it already possessed the strength to stand on equal footing with the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, what frightened the experts of the Fortune God dynasty the most was not this matter, but the fact that after the Chaos Overlord became the ruler of the Chaos God dynasty, it was obvious that the destiny of the entire Chaos God dynasty had been strengthened. Although it could not be compared to the Fortune God dynasty at its peak, it was still far from the current Fortune God dynasty. After all, the Chaos God dynasty was forcibly organized. It would take a long time for these tribes to submit wholeheartedly. Destiny was the sum of the will of all living beings. The Chaos God dynasty still had a long way to go, but it had already begun to show signs of progress. This reminded them of the Fortune God Heavenly Monarch of the past. The Fortune God Heavenly Monarch was originally one of the many half-step sovereigns. Although he had the upper hand, he was not much stronger. However, after he established the Fortune God dynasty, the people's hearts were aligned, and the mandate of heaven was on his side. After being blessed by the Fortune God dynasty's destiny, he broke through the shackles in one fell swoop. In the battle with the Chaos Overlord, he finally broke through and became a sovereign expert. Many people understood this process, and there were many people who wanted to replicate it, including the great supremes and the city lords of the 10 great divine cities. However, they had not even stepped into the half-step sovereign realm, and it was impossible for them to have the mandate of heaven like the Fortune God Heavenly Monarch. Apart from the former Middle Heavenly Venerate, there was only one Middle Heavenly Venerate. Even so, he was only a peak Middle Heavenly Venerate. At most, he had touched the level of a ruler, but he was still far from being a true ruler. However, the primal Chaos Overlord was only a step away. Under such circumstances, how could they not be worried that the primal Chaos Overlord would take advantage of the situation and directly step into the sovereign realm? At that time, it would be true despair. Although this process might take millions or even tens of millions of years, Such a short period of time was nothing to these heavenly masters and emperors who had lived for hundreds of millions of years. It was almost a matter right in front of their eyes. This made many people panic, and panic spread, and concentrated in Yi Shiwen's side, who asked him to be the person in charge of the Fortune God dynasty, so he naturally had to be responsible for the current situation. Moreover, many people also secretly felt that Yi Shiwen should not have let the Chaos Overlord go at all, and should have killed him to eliminate future troubles. Many people were quite dissatisfied with Yi Shiwen's actions, but Yi Shiwen's absolute strength suppressed them, so they did not dare to say anything to his face. After all, through the Chaos Overlord's expedition to the outer domain, they all understood the ferocity of the Chaos Overlord. It was not something that a peak heavenly master with a half-step sovereign realm Tao artifact could contend with, and Yi Shiwen's previous battle with the Chaos Overlord was raised by many people without limit. In many people's opinion, it was not wrong to say that Yi Shiwen was the current #1 heavenly master. With such strength, it was indeed enough to show disdain for all heroes. Even if he was a little worse than the Chaos Overlord, he was still much more tyrannical than them. So although they had some complaints, they did not dare to say anything. And these things, although those people hid very well, Yi Shiwen could still feel it. In this regard, he just smiled slightly. How could those people understand? Although he appeared to be very relaxed at that time, in fact, he did not have the strength to kill the Chaos Overlord. Even if the Chaos Overlord was not at its peak, fighting to that point was actually Yi Shiwen's limit. After all, his true combat power was still a level away, and there was no way to step into the half-step sovereign realm. How much strength could he exert was completely dependent on the good fortune treasure robe and the sword of destiny. Under such circumstances, withdrawing at the right time was the most appropriate choice. Unless he really intended to fight to a lose-lose situation, and finally be taken advantage of by those old antiques from the ancient era. Although the Chaos Overlord's actions were unexpected, he quickly figured it out. The Chaos Overlord, who had suffered a big loss, finally understood that he wanted to embark on the same path as the Fate Creation Heavenly Lord. After all, there was such a successful case in front of him, and he certainly wanted to imitate it. Although the current Chaos God dynasty was just a newly established dynasty, it should not be underestimated. When the Fate Creation Heavenly Lord founded the Fortune God dynasty, no one took him seriously. However, in the end, he was the only one who stood out. Although the establishment of the Fortune God dynasty could not be said to be the only reason, it was certainly an important reason. Now, the Chaos Overlord's actions also made Yi Shiwen feel a lot of pressure. It could be said that there were internal and external troubles. External pressure from the ancient era, and internal pressure from the Chaos God dynasty. When he was just an Eastern Heavenly Lord, he did not need to consider these things. However, now that he was in charge of the Fortune God dynasty, he had to consider these things. The Middle Heavenly Lord's injuries were too serious. In a short period of time, it was very difficult to recover even with the various healing treasures of the Fortune God dynasty, and his cultivation might even regress. After all, he was seriously injured by the half-moon immortal monarch, and in the end, he exhausted his life source in order to delay the three-peak Heavenly Lords. Now is the time to find the Chaos Overlord and have a chat. Yi Shiwen's figure flickered slightly, and when he reappeared, he was already in the outer domain. The direction he was heading towards was none other than the direction of the newly established Chaos God dynasty. At this time, he had just suppressed the resistance of the various forces and forced them to bow their heads. It could be said that he was proud of himself. And now, it was time for the Chaos God dynasty to hold a celebration for the establishment of the Chaos God dynasty. The leaders of the major forces in the outer domain had also come, and even the various emperor-level existences were included. This time, the venue of the celebration was set on an incomparably huge island in the Stormy Sea region. This incomparably huge island had a circumference of hundreds of millions of miles. It was simply a supercontinent. What was more amazing was that this huge island was actually an incomparably huge black tortoise. This black tortoise was originally a heavenly lord, but it was later subdued by the Chaos Overlord, and since then, it had become his Tao field. After the Chaos Overlord was subdued, this black tortoise disappeared. It was not until the Chaos Overlord returned that this black tortoise reappeared, and turned into a huge continental Tao field. And this time, the celebration, including the future core of the Chaos God dynasty, would also be held on this incomparably huge island. In the outer domain, there were actually more Emperor-Lord level powerhouses than the Fortune God dynasty, but they could not live for a long time, so they had no way to crush the Fortune God dynasty in terms of numbers. At this time, all of them were gathered together, and it was even grander than the Heavenly Lord Conference held by the Fortune God dynasty. Majestic, countless terrifying auras rushed into the sky, faintly condensing into a mighty long stream in the depths of the space. Yi Shiwen looked from afar and sighed in his heart. This was the precursor to the formation of destiny. It was obvious that the Chaos Overlord was about to become a force, unless he killed the Chaos Overlord now. But this thought only flashed in his mind for a moment, and then disappeared without a trace. He still understood the importance of priorities. Chaos Overlord, an old friend is here to ask for a drink? Is that okay? Chapter 3761. Chaos Overlord, an old friend is here to ask for a drink? Is that okay? Yi Shiwen's voice spread throughout the entire celebration venue. His undisguised voice almost immediately alarmed all the emperors and heavenly venerables present. No one noticed when Yi Shiwen had arrived at the venue. In other words, the boundaries and arrays in the venue could not stop Yi Shiwen's footsteps at all. Is it the Eastern Heavenly Master of the Fortune God dynasty? Many people were familiar with Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was the most popular person in the entire Fortune God realm recently. He rose at an astonishing speed, not to mention the battle between Yi Shiwen and the Chaos Overlord. Many people saw it with their own eyes. Although the final result was a tie, Yi Shiwen made the Chaos Overlord suffer a big loss at the beginning, causing the Chaos Overlord to bleed. If they didn't know what it meant at the beginning, then now, after the Chaos Overlord's expedition to the outer domain and the establishment of the Chaos God dynasty, they already understood what kind of terrifying strength and confidence it represented. Yes, it really is him. What is he doing here? Incomparably powerful fierce beasts appeared one after another, each more tyrannical than the last. Pan Heng's presence in the hall was different from the Fortune Divine dynasty. Some of these foreign domains' extreme Tao experts were in human form, while some were in their true form. They didn't feel restrained at all, or rather, they didn't care about it. Eastern Heavenly Master, what are you doing here? How dare you come here? At this time, a Heavenly Master of the Stormy Sea region stood up and pointed at Yi Shiwen. He almost pointed his finger in front of Yi Shiwen's nose. If it was one-on-one, of course, he would not have the guts. But now that they were in their territory, and there was the Chaos Overlord, he had the guts. Yi Shiwen just glanced at him and said, "You'd better put your hand down. Otherwise, don't come to me if I cause any permanent damage to you." "You dare to threaten me? Do you know where you are? What day is it today? Is it the time for you to behave atrociously?" The Heavenly Master of the Stormy Sea region was furious, but his body unconsciously followed Yi Shiwen's words. He put his arm down and did not dare to point at Yi Shiwen. The guy in front of him was someone who would even dare to beat up the Primal Chaos Overlord once he went crazy. Compared to Yi Shiwen, he was really too weak. Yi Shiwen just smiled faintly. Wherever his gaze passed, the foreign Emperor Lords and Empyreans didn't dare to look him in the eye. Even peak Empyreans didn't dare to look him in the eye. Yi Shiwen's previous battle with the Chaos Overlord had really shown his prowess. Otherwise, how could they allow Yi Shiwen to be arrogant here now? they would have come up and attacked long ago. You don't have to be so hostile. I'm not here to make trouble. I just heard that the Chaos Divine Dynasty has been established, so I'm here to ask for a cup of wine. As Yi Shiwen spoke, he looked at the Primal Chaos Overlord at the very top. The Primal Chaos Tyrant was wearing a loose robe and was half lying on a cloud bed. His expression was a little blurred, and he looked a little tipsy. Eastern Heavenly Master, why are you here? If there's anything, just say it. The Primal Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen, and a faint killing intent flashed in his eyes. But in the end, he endured it because he knew that he couldn't kill Yi Shiwen at this time. If he fought here, he would be the one to suffer in the end. Just as Yi Shiwen had originally guessed, dragons didn't live with snakes, and the eagle in the sky wouldn't look at the ants on the ground. At this time, the Primal Chaos Overlord could endure all the impatience because of that battle. The Primal Chaos Overlord realized that no matter what the reason was, Yi Shiwen indeed had the qualifications to be on an equal footing with him. So, he had no choice but to humble himself. Yi Shiwen didn't stand on ceremony at all. He directly sat on a throne and said, "The first thing I'm here today is to congratulate the establishment of the Chaos Divine Dynasty." Hearing this, many of the foreign heavenly masters looked a little better. In their opinion, Yi Shiwen probably saw that their Chaos Divine Dynasty was powerful and wanted to represent the Fortune Divine Dynasty to admit defeat. They couldn't help but show a bit of excitement on their faces. Although they were a little unhappy that they were forced to form a Chaos Divine Dynasty, they were even secretly dissatisfied. But now that they saw the high and mighty Eastern Heavenly Master of the Fortune Divine Dynasty actually representing the Fortune Divine Dynasty to seek peace, how could they not feel proud? In the past, although they were known to pose a huge threat to the Fortune Divine Dynasty, they had never really been taken seriously by the big shots of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Especially big shots like the East, South, West, and West Heavenly Masters. Usually, they wouldn't even look at them. They boasted that they were the center of the world, and they, the foreign heavenly masters, were just people outside of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, no matter how strong they were. They weren't on the same level at all, and they really didn't have this confidence. Under the situation where the Fortune Divine Dynasty had to resist the attack of the Ancient Era, they couldn't deal with the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Such a record was indeed not qualified to raise their heads in front of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, but this was just the beginning. Even the Fortune Divine Dynasty had to bow their heads. This made them taste the benefits of being a group for the first time. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but smile when he saw the smug look on their faces. He said, "The second thing is to send the Chaos Divine Dynasty to its grave." "What, Eastern Heavenly Master? What do you want to do? Are you courting death? I think you are really courting death. Kill him." As soon as Yi Shiwen's words came out, it was like poking a hornet's nest. The foreign heavenly masters and emperors suddenly became agitated. Whether it was sincere or not, it was just a show for the Chaos Overlord to see. All the heavenly masters suddenly became furious. Waves of terrifying aura instantly surrounded Yi Shiwen. It seemed like they wanted to tear Yi Shiwen's body into thousands of pieces. In the face of these terrifying auras, Yi Shiwen didn't even have the slightest change in expression. Even those terrifying auras became invisible when they were 3 feet away from Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's magic power was profound, and he possessed remarkable abilities. Although it was only a method that didn't reveal its true power, it still made many people realize that Yi Shiwen's magic power was profound, and his magical powers were extensive. It wasn't difficult to get rid of the aura of a heavenly venerate silently. However, the difficulty of getting rid of the aura of a group of heavenly venerates and emperor lords was several times higher. It was even more horrifying to do so in such a secretive manner. Many foreign heavenly masters' eyes flashed with a bit of pondering. Yi Shiwen didn't explain. He just looked at these people coldly, and then looked at the Chaos Overlord. The other foreign heavenly masters and emperors also looked at the Chaos Overlord. Obviously, everyone knew who the person in charge here was. Seeing that everyone's eyes were looking at him, waiting for him to make a decision, the Chaos Overlord revealed a somewhat satisfied expression. This was the reason why he established the Chaos Divine Dynasty. All foreign lifeforms in the world had to follow his lead. Only then would he have the possibility of contending against the Fortune Heavenly Monarch and the current Fortune Divine Dynasty. Eastern Heavenly Master, I don't think you came here to joke with me. If you are just joking, this joke is a bit too big. Not everyone can joke in front of me without paying a price. The Chaos Overlord's voice was a bit lazy, but the cold, killing intent in his tone was obvious to everyone. Although he wasn't sure that he could kill Yi Shiwen here, this was his territory. He was still confident that he could make Yi Shiwen escape in a sorry state. The reason why he didn't attack immediately was that he wanted to see what this guy was up to. He didn't believe that Yi Shiwen had come all the way from the Fortune Divine capital just to provoke him. In the process of conquering the foreign territories, he finally figured out many things after he was suppressed. Now, his former opponent, the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, the former Middle Heavenly Master, had disappeared. The current Middle Heavenly Master was also seriously injured and in a state of closed-door cultivation. Now, the person who controlled the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty was this young man with a cold smile in front of him. This person himself couldn't be underestimated, and he also represented a behemoth like the Fortune Divine Dynasty behind him. All the more he couldn't underestimate him, even if it was just a few words. Yi Shiwen stood up from the throne and walked to the center of the entire venue. He then said in front of everyone's eyes, speaking of which, you probably don't understand. Do you really think that I have nothing better to do? Do you really think that I have nothing better to do and have come here to cause trouble for you? No one spoke and looked at the Chaos Overlord again until the Chaos Overlord said, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't be so wishy-washy. You probably don't know that you are already in big trouble. You don't even know that death is imminent. Yi Shiwen didn't have the slightest fear in the face of the ferocious foreign creatures. He just said indifferently. His words caused all of the Emperor-level lifeforms and Empyreans to go berserk. Each of Yi Shiwen's words was more and more unpleasant to hear, more and more provocative than the last. This made them all angry all of a sudden. What did you say? Why don't you try saying it again? Believe it or not, I will kill you. However, he heard a burst of exclamation. The Celestial Master who said that he would kill Yi Shiwen only felt a blur in front of him. Yi Shiwen didn't know when Yi Shiwen had flashed in front of him and grabbed his throat. He instantly felt suffocated. The power of his whole body was sealed by a strange force. He could only look at Yi Shiwen in front of him with a sneer on his face and said, "Don't take my patience for granted. You can't afford to provoke everyone. Don't think that I won't dare to make a move here." Chapter 3762. Everyone was shocked by Yi Shiwen's sudden outburst. They didn't expect Yi Shiwen to dare to make a move here. The most terrifying thing was that no one saw him make a move. Yi Shiwen was a celestial master of the seventh realm. He was definitely an outstanding figure among the celestial masters. Initially, they thought that even if he was not Yi Shiwen's opponent, a high-level celestial master would be able to contend with Yi Shiwen for a period of time. After all, Yi Shiwen wasn't the chaotic overlord. If he didn't use the good fortune robe and the sword of destiny, he could only be considered a peak heavenly master at best. But now that he made a move, they found that they were wrong. And they were ridiculously wrong. Yi Shiwen made a seventh realm heavenly master lose the ability to resist with one hand. What kind of terrifying strength was this? Many people had such a feeling in their hearts. How is this possible? They are all heavenly masters. How can he be so tyrannical? Many people couldn't believe it. It seemed as if they couldn't believe that Yi Shiwen could be so strong. They were all heavenly masters, but the gap between them was like heaven and earth. After intimidating everyone, Yi Shiwen threw the seventh realm foreign heavenly venerable to the ground like a dead dog. The foreign heavenly master coughed wildly. His face was flushed, and he felt as though he had escaped from death. If he hadn't experienced it himself, he would have almost forgotten that a mortal would be strangled to death. If he couldn't breathe, he would also die. Eastern Heavenly Master, you didn't come here to hurt my subordinate. Just say what you want. You don't have to be so mysterious. The chaotic overlord just watched without speaking. He didn't even make a move to rescue the seventh realm foreign heavenly master. He just sneered in his heart. This was an existence that could fight to a draw with him. Who do you think you are? How dare you be disrespectful to him? Not taking Yi Shiwen to heart meant that he didn't take him to heart. He knew that these people were still a little dissatisfied, so he took advantage of Yi Shiwen's hand to teach these people a lesson. To let them understand that some people couldn't be dealt with by numbers. Yi Shiwen was such a person, and so was he. And Yi Shiwen also seemed to understand this truth. So, he attacked without any scruples. I have a message for you, Yi Shiwen said indifferently. What news? Say it. Chaos Overlord said patiently. He was already starting to get a little impatient. The martial epoch is ending, Yi Shiwen said lightly. Impossible! You must be joking. Nonsense. You're just trying to mislead the masses. Many sovereign emperors and heavenly venerables of the foreign domains did not believe him at all. They directly criticized Yi Shiwen for trying to confuse the masses with lies and nonsense. As sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates, they were the strongest group of people in the world. They were extreme Tao experts, so they were very sensitive to the world. Therefore, they were very clear that the martial epoch still had tens of billions of years left. Although it was past its peak, destruction was not something that could happen in a short time. They were even more certain that Yi Shiwen was simply talking nonsense. Eastern Lord, I think you'd better explain yourself. Otherwise, I won't be polite. Although Chaos Overlord was speaking the truth, he immediately sat up on the cloud bed. His eyes flickered, and there was no trace of his previous tipsy appearance. Instantly, a horrifying aura enveloped the entire island. All right, then I'll explain it to you clearly. According to the news our Fortune God dynasty received, several half-step sovereigns from the ancient epochs plan to join forces to encircle the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. If they succeed, without the protection of the martial epoch, not to mention our Fortune divine dynasty, even you, the entire Fortune realm and its affiliated worlds will become food in a grand banquet. Do you think those ancient epochs will let us off? Yi Shiwen continued, and if they succeed, without the protection of the martial epoch, not to mention our Fortune divine dynasty. How is that possible? The martial epoch's heavenly Tao doesn't have a physical body. How can they encircle it? I don't believe it. Each ancient epoch has a deep-seated hatred for each other. It's impossible for them to work together, not to mention several half-step sovereigns from the ancient epochs. This is simply your Fortune God dynasty's one-sided story. A bunch of nonsense. What does it have to do with me whether you believe it or not? I'm just here to inform you that you're about to die. Chaos God dynasty, haha, a force that will be destroyed in 2 days. What's there to celebrate? Yi Shiwen sneered and said sarcastically. However, many foreign sovereign emperors and heavenly venerables were in a state of extreme shock. Although they instinctively wanted to refute Yi Shiwen's words, after the initial shock, they believed Yi Shiwen's words. After all, Yi Shiwen wouldn't joke about such a big matter, let alone enter the dragon's pool and tiger's den alone just to make fun of them. And if this matter wasn't groundless accusations, but the truth, then the consequences would be even more terrifying. If the heavenly Tao collapsed, they would definitely become meat on the ancient epoch's chopping board. In the end, as Yi Shiwen said, the Chaos God dynasty would become a joke. It was destroyed less than 2 days after it was established. As for them, they naturally became a joke with a bold capital. How did they do it? The Chaos Overlord looked directly at Yi Shiwen and asked. He didn't doubt that Yi Shiwen was joking, so he asked directly. To make the martial epoc's heavenly Tao appear, such a method was incredible. Even he didn't dare to imagine it. Unlike the many ancient records in the Fortune God dynasty, the Chaos Overlord was active in a very long time ago. It could even be said that it was a barbaric era. During that era, the Fortune God realm itself was still fighting crazily, so it had no time to care about the ancient epoch. Although he had killed many ancient era powerhouses who entered the Fortune God realm, he actually didn't have a systematic understanding of the ancient epoch. He knew some general trends, but when it came to specific details, he was also clueless. He was not much better than Yi Shiwen, who had recently come to the Fortune God realm. I don't know how they did it specifically. I only know that they obtained the means left behind by a person named Absolute Heaven Sage. He was a Dominator-level figure. Most importantly, he had succeeded before. Yi Shiwen looked at the Chaos Overlord and said directly. The Chaos Overlord's eyes lit up. Among the Dominator-level figures, he only knew of the Fate Creation Heaven Sage. That was before the Fate Creation Heaven Sage attained the Tao. After the Fate Creation Heaven Sage attained the Tao, the Chaos Overlord could never forget that terrifying and peerless aura. He was defeated by the Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord without being able to fight back. Just when he thought he was going to die, he didn't expect that the Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord didn't have any intention of killing him. The Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord had only shocked him until now. The Chaos Overlord's understanding was limited, but it didn't prevent him from guessing how terrifying a figure of that level was. Since the other party obtained the means left behind by a Dominator-level expert, the result was already very obvious. Have you fought? The Chaos Overlord asked. How many half-step Dominators did the other party have? The Chaos Overlord's words came out like a cannon. Even he couldn't remain calm in the face of several existences at his level. It wasn't just the Chaos Overlord. All the foreign Emperor-level lifeforms and Heavenly Venerables held their breaths and listened attentively to Yi Shiwen's words. Just the Chaos Overlord alone had beaten them to the point where they couldn't fight back. They had almost been killed. If there were a few more of such existences, the consequences would be unimaginable. Naturally, we have fought. Our Fortune God dynasty's Middle Heavenly Venerables, Western Heavenly Venerables, and many high-level Heavenly Venerables were injured by one of the half-step Dominators. As for how many of them there were, we don't know. But as far as I know, I'm afraid there are no less than 5 of them. Yi Shiwen stretched out a hand, spread it open, and said. Suddenly, there were exclamations and the sound of people sucking in a breath of cold air. A single primal Chaos Overlord was already so terrifying. A single primal Chaos Overlord was enough to turn the entire Fortune realm upside down. If there were 5 of them, or even more, then the entire Fortune realm would probably be overturned. The destruction of the martial epoch that Yi Shiwen mentioned was not impossible. Even if the Fortune God dynasty joined hands with the primal Chaos Overlord, would they be able to resist the half-step sovereigns that numbered no less than 5? After all, when the Fortune realm was at its peak, which was also when the martial epoch was at its peak, there were only 5 half-step sovereigns. Now, only the primal Chaos Overlord was left. How is this possible? Every half-step Dominator is very proud and aloof. How could they be connected? The Chaos Overlord said quickly, as if he couldn't believe it. As far as I'm concerned, there must be someone behind all of this. However, the most important thing now is not why they are doing this, but rather, they are indeed doing this. Those old guys are about to die, and in order to survive, they are willing to do anything. Yi Shiwen said. Many people present empathized with his words. Not everyone among them could live forever. In order to survive, they would do anything. You want to join forces with me? When the Chaos Overlord heard this, he already understood what Yi Shiwen meant. That's right. Let's not beat around the bush. Our Fortune God dynasty can't stop so many enemies, so we want to cooperate with you. Of course, you can also sit and wait for us to perish. But if we perish, you will be buried with us. They are targeting the entire martial epoch, not just the Fortune God dynasty. Yi Shiwen looked into the Chaos Overlord's eyes and said with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. Cooperation? What do you think? Chapter 3763. That's right, this was Yi Shiwen's plan. He was not willing to be the shield of the Chaos God dynasty. Why should the Fortune God dynasty rush to the front line and bear all the problems alone? He wanted to drag the Chaos God dynasty down with him. Either they join forces to fight against the foreign enemies, or they die together. Let's see who dies faster. Although he wanted to protect the Fortune God dynasty as much as possible, what was the use of protecting the Fortune God dynasty if the martial epoch was gone? He would not take the blame for the Chaos God dynasty. The entire venue was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Not even the sound of breathing could be heard. Everyone looked at the Chaos Overlord, especially the emperors and celestial venerables from the foreign domain. They all knew that the next decision of the Chaos Overlord would determine the future of the entire Chaos Divine Dynasty and even the creation realm. All of this depended on his decision. The Chaos Overlord also pondered for a long time, but he still couldn't make up his mind. The hatred between the Fortune Divine Dynasty and the Chaos Divine Dynasty must be as deep as the sea. Who knew how many experts and clansmen had died in each other's hands? But obviously, the threat of the ancient era was also a very real problem. If the Fortune God dynasty was on the front line, they might not care about it. But now that even the Fortune God dynasty was helpless, they had no choice but to face it. In particular, the other party didn't only plan to attack the Fortune God dynasty. If they attacked the Fortune God dynasty, they could just watch the battle and come out to clean up the mess. It was a good choice. The ancient era was ambitious and planned to destroy the entire martial epoch and the heavenly Tao of the martial epoch. If they lost their support, they would become the meat on the chopping board of the ancient era. Yi Shiwen was relying on such a situation to dare to swagger here. He was certain that the Chaos Divine Dynasty wouldn't let the situation deteriorate to such an extent. The Chaos Overlord glanced at Yi Shiwen and said, "Eastern Heavenly Venerate, you don't have to threaten me. It is impossible for the Chaos God Dynasty to join forces with the Fortune God Dynasty. But we will see what happens when the time comes." Yi Shiwen cupped his hands and said, "When the time comes, I will wait for your arrival." Then Yi Shiwen left. His purpose of coming here had been achieved. In any case, this was much better than the worst situation he had imagined. The worst environment he had imagined was the Chaos Divine Dynasty, where the ancient era would be attacked from both inside and outside. Now, it was obvious that the Chaos Overlord had been persuaded by him. That was enough. All that was left was to go all out. Looking at Yi Shiwen's departing figure, many experts of the Chaos God Dynasty no longer felt happy. A dark cloud was forming above the head of the newly established Chaos God Dynasty. It was impossible for them to ignore it even if they wanted to. The shadow of destruction loomed over them. Floating above the Fortune realm, Yi Shiwen bent down and looked down. It was not just the Fortune realm, but also the billions of living beings in the entire martial epoch. All of this would be a catastrophe in the future, and he would never allow that to happen. After returning from the Chaos God Dynasty, Yi Shiwen entered a state of closed-door cultivation. He did not see anyone, just to prepare for the final battle. Although they did not reach an agreement to cooperate, the two giants of the martial epoch, the Fortune God Dynasty and the Chaos God Dynasty, had begun to make preparations because they knew how terrifying the final battle would be. At least 5 half-step sovereigns were about to lead the ancient era behind them to attack the Fortune God dynasty. Even the ordinary creatures down below sensed that something was amiss. It was as if something extraordinary was about to happen. Under the restraint of the Chaos Overlord and Yi Shiwen, the two giants did not have direct conflicts for the first time. The peace that they had not enjoyed for many years appeared at this time. This could not be denied, but it was a miracle. Such peaceful days lasted until one day. In an instant, the entire Chaos God dynasty was surrounded by a crazy and terrifying aura. Under this aura, a figure descended from the sky. However, they saw that this figure had an unimaginably terrifying aura, so powerful that even an imperial emperor, an extreme powerhouse, felt as if he had become an ant in front of it. There was a terrifying injury on his body. It was as if his body had been sliced into two. He descended directly into the northern region of the Fortune God dynasty. All the living beings in the world were trembling in front of him. I finally came in. Unfortunately, the Fortune Heavenly Monarch is no longer here. What a pity, what a pity, he said slowly. When he landed on the ground, the area within a radius of 10 million miles was directly torn apart, and the earth was pierced through. All the living beings within a radius of 10 million miles turned into a blood-colored torrent that poured into his body, healing his injuries. This was a terrifying existence. He was smiling, but his smile was incomparably cold. He did not care about the death of these countless living beings. Countless living beings were wailing, but there was nothing they could do. They simply could not resist such a powerful existence. It wasn't just the living beings within a radius of 10 million miles. All the living beings in the entire northern region were shaken. Regardless of whether they were heavenly venerates or ordinary living beings, they could all feel the terrifying aura enveloping all of them. Stop! Aren't you afraid of incurring the wrath of the heavens by doing this? At that moment, a loud shout came from the northern region. The North Heavenly Venerate flew out, and countless auras followed him. They were all well-known figures in the northern region. Even if they were not emperors, they were heavenly venerates. Among them, the North Heavenly Venerate was the leader. His body exuded an unimaginable might, and countless traces of destiny gathered on his body in a visible torrent. He was using a secret technique to temporarily gather the destiny of the northern region on his body in order to resist this terrifying figure. This was because he knew that he would not be a match for this terrifying figure if he just relied on his original strength. With the blessing of destiny on his body, his strength skyrocketed to an unimaginable level. The North Heavenly Venerate looked at everything in front of him angrily. This figure was too terrifying, too powerful, and too cruel. He did not take them seriously at all. He also understood what kind of existence this figure in front of him was. A half-step sovereign. Only a half-step sovereign could be so tyrannical, causing their expressions to change and making them feel helpless. The North Heavenly Venerate's eyes revealed extreme anger. Yi Shiwen had previously informed them that a half-step sovereign from the ancient era would invade, and all of this had finally happened. At this time, in their homeland, they had no other choice. Even if they knew that they would suffer heavy casualties, they had the Fortune God dynasty behind them. It was not like the ancient era battlefield, where they had nowhere to retreat. Wrath of the heavens? Can you still feel your heaven's will? That figure grinned. After that, his expression grew even more indifferent. He directly opened his mouth and inhaled. In an instant, the bodies of countless living beings suddenly exploded, transforming into a blood-colored torrent that gushed into his mouth. The injuries on his body healed even more, just like the primal Chaos Overlord back then. He was even more cruel than the primal Chaos Overlord. For existences like them, this kind of slaughter was nothing. The path they walked was a path of mountains of corpses and seas of blood. It was the path of kings paved with the corpses of all living beings. When the North Heavenly Venerate heard this, he immediately sensed the heavenly Tao. Indeed, he could no longer feel the existence of the heavenly Tao. All the great Taos started to become a little chaotic. How is this possible? The North Heavenly Venerate exclaimed in shock. Why is it impossible? Your fortune Heavenly Monarch can refine the heaven-sealing talisman. Now we have sealed your martial epoch. What's so strange about that? The figure grinned, but his smile was even more sinister. Clearly they had come prepared. They did not seem to have come in a hurry. This is the Devil Epoch's heavenless demon monarch. All of a sudden, one of the old-timers shuddered as he recalled exactly who this person standing in front of him was. The moment Huang Xiaolong brought it up, the others also recalled the Devil Dao era's heavenless devil monarch. He was an incomparably powerful half-step sovereign realm expert from the Devil Dao era. The reason why they had such an impression of him was because the heavenless devil monarch had once led an army to attack the Fortune Divine Dynasty, but he had been defeated by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. At that time, he had encountered the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, who had just reached great perfection in his great Tao and had stepped into the sovereign realm. The Fortune Heavenly Monarch had severely injured the heavenless demon monarch with one sword strike, forcing him to flee. The Devil Epoch's army had also collapsed. However, that was something that happened a long time ago during the Fortune Heavenly Monarch's era. Furthermore, the heavenless demon monarch had only revealed his face for a short while before being severely injured by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. Thus, many people did not have a deep impression of him. In fact, during the Fortune Heavenly Monarch's era, the Fortune God Dynasty was unparalleled. It had conquered many epochs and defeated many powerful enemies. Just the ancient epoch alone had been uprooted. Many half-step sovereign experts had been defeated, and there were even records of sovereign experts from the ancient epoch taking action. Among these people, the heavenless demon monarch did not leave a deep impression. Thus, it was only now that Old Antique had dug out this person's memories. The terrifying injuries on his body had clearly been left behind by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, and he had yet to recover from them. The Fortune Heavenly Monarch's might back then was evident. Just a casual strike from him was enough to render the heavenless demon monarch helpless. The figure grinned and said, "Finally, someone remembers me. Ha 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 ha. Everything that the Fortune Heavenly Monarch did to me, I will return to you all." Chapter 3764. The Heavenless Demon Lord's words sent everyone into a state of extreme terror. "I won't let you do whatever you want," the Northern Heavenly Venerate said through gritted teeth. "Do you think you can do that?" The Heavenless Demon Lord sneered. "We are not unprepared," the Northern Heavenly Venerate bellowed. "Do as we have planned." The Emperor, Emperors, and Heavenly Venerates were already prepared. In an instant an incomparably huge array appeared. With the Northern Heavenly Venerate as the main array a huge imprisonment array was formed. The target of this imprisonment array was the Heavenless Demon Lord. "Even if I die today, I won't let you do whatever you want," the Northern Heavenly Venerate bellowed. The Heavenly Venerates and Emperors looked as though they were facing death with equanimity. No matter how much hatred they had no choice but to fight to the death against the Heavenless Demon Lord. Beneath their feet was the Fortune Divine Dynasty, their families, and their sections. If even they were defeated, then the entire northern region would be finished. Heavenless Demon Lord instantly felt like he had been sealed by a large array formation. How terrifying was this array formation! Even a middle heavenly venerate would be trapped in it and die little by little if they encountered a large array formation of this level. However, he didn't feel too much about it. He just smiled coldly and said, "You probably don't understand. The gap between me and a heavenly venerate isn't something you can stop." The Heavenless Demon Lord clenched his fist and punched towards the void. Rumble! There was a deafening roar and the whole world was shaking. The formation was shaking constantly, and the sovereign emperors and celestial venerables in various parts of the formation could only feel a tremendous force falling on their bodies. It was so strong that their internal organs were trembling, and they felt like they could vomit blood at any time. It was too terrifying, and this was even with the formation taking up most of the pressure. Otherwise, any one of them would have died if it had been them. You want to stop me with this array? The heavenless demon lord sneered, and the corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. The sky fell and the earth cracked. It was as if the whole world was shaking violently. At this moment, the North Tianzuan stepped out of the array formation and looked at the entire northern region where the heavenless demon lord had just massacred. The entire place looked like a living hell. There was grief and indignation on his face. It wasn't that he hadn't seen massacres before. There were quite a lot of massacres in the northern region, but it wasn't like this. They were turned into food as soon as they appeared. They weren't treated as humans at all. They were like ants that could be trampled to death at will. He knew that he couldn't let the heavenless demon lord do as he pleased, otherwise this formation wouldn't be able to stop him for long. You want to stop me? You think you can? When heavenless demon monarch saw Heavenly Venerate North step forward, he immediately understood Heavenly Venerate North's plan. Heavenless demon monarch wanted to use his own strength to stall heavenless demon monarch. A mere peak Empyrean wants to stop me? You overestimate yourself. Everyone could see the mockery on heavenless demon monarch's lips. Only a powerful existence like him could. Although I'm only a peak Empyrean, I represent all living beings in the northern region. I can't stop you, but what about the will of all living beings? You don't treat all living beings as humans and wantonly slaughter them. You will receive retribution sooner or later. The North Tianzuan looked at the heavenless demon lord and said, it was indeed impossible for him to stop heavenless demon lord with his strength. However, he had the luck of the northern region and the will of all living beings on him. Perhaps he could put up a fight. You overestimate yourself. The heavenless demon lord was still disdainful. What are all living beings? Heaven and earth are heartless and treat all living beings like dogs. In the eyes of heaven and earth, all living beings are no different from ants. This is the true heavenly Tao. You haven't comprehended it to this extent, so you can't even withstand a single blow. Cut the crap. The North Tianzuan was so angry that he laughed. A terrifying aura erupted from his body and instantly broke through the peak Empyrean level. He even surpassed the level of a middle Empyrean. This was because his strength had been greatly enhanced after the luck of the northern region was added to his body. Boom! The North Tianzuan instantly made his move. The endless great path boiled in his hand and then rose into the sky, turning into a huge palm that blasted towards the heavenless demon lord. This was a kind of matchless divine technique. In an instant, a terrifying power erupted. If this had happened in the outside world, who knew how many stars would have exploded? Now, all of this power was offset by the array formation on the battlefield. In the face of this move that clearly surpassed the limits of a heavenly venerate, the heavenless demon lord didn't panic. The North Tianzuan was terrifying, but he was even more terrifying. He was able to survive the reincarnation of eras again, and even escape from the hands of the fortune creation heavenly lord. Naturally, he wasn't an ordinary person. The heavenless demon lord simply raised his hand and pointed a finger. In an instant, it was as if a long river of time had appeared. The light at that moment was too brilliant and incomparably gorgeous. Boom! The palm of the North Tianzuan and the finger of the heavenless demon lord collided. The sky instantly collapsed. With the collision as the center point, the shock waves instantly spread in all directions. Even the array formation that was swept by the shock waves couldn't help but tremble. The emperors, and heavenly venerates who were maintaining the array formation turned pale. It was really too terrifying. Just the shock waves of the explosion were already very difficult to stop. However, they had no other choice. They had to stop it. Otherwise, the entire northern region would be finished. Thump, thump. The North Tianzuan retreated for millions of miles before he finally calmed down. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. In the previous collision, his heart and lungs had been injured. The heavenless demon lord was indeed terrifying. If it wasn't for the northern region destiny tiger god, he would have been seriously injured or even killed. However, the heavenless demon lord's body also shook slightly. Although the North Tianzuan couldn't hurt him, it was obvious that he wasn't in a good state either. Although he was still powerful, he was no longer without weaknesses. The injuries on his body were his biggest weakness. It was obvious that the North Tianzuan had also seen through this point. He didn't want to die. The emperors and heavenly venerates didn't want to die either. However, it was clear that the heavenless demon lord had come with the intention of annihilating them. In that case, they wouldn't lack the courage to fight. It was nothing more than a fight to the death. Therefore, although the North Tianzuan had suffered a loss in the first move, he didn't retreat. Instead, he took a step forward. He kept slapping his palms down, turning them into extremely resplendent torrents of light that flooded towards the heavenless demon lord. The heavenless demon lord didn't hold back and pointed his finger again. He quickly realized the North Tianzuan's intention and couldn't help but be furious. The North Tianzuan had grasped his obvious weakness and unleashed a series of continuous attacks, thoroughly infuriating the heavenless demon lord. "I think you're really courting death." The heavenless demon lord roared and immediately unleashed his most terrifying attack, which instantly engulfed the North Tianzuan. Boom, boom, boom. Every time they collided, the heavens and earth would rumble, and the entire formation would be densely packed with cracks. It should be known that this array was used to trap and kill middle heavenly venerate. However, the shock waves of the two's attacks swept through the array in no time. Wounds of various sizes appeared on the array. This was an unprecedented situation. It was easy to imagine how terrifying the shock waves of the battle between the two were. If this goes on, I'm afraid it won't be long before the formation breaks. This is a true battle between half-step rulers. We have no way out. We can only fight to the death until the East Tianzuan arrives. Does the heavens really want to destroy our martial epic? Just a heavily injured half-step sovereign is already so terrifying. If more than 5 half-step sovereigns were to descend, it would be too frightening. Many sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates felt despair in their hearts. Did they really have a chance of winning against such a strong enemy? Bang! The North Tianzuan's figure flew out of the clump of light. He was severely injured in the exchange between the two. Blard! The northern heavenly venerate spat out a mouthful of essence blood before he managed to stabilize himself. There was a huge bloody hole in his chest that had been pierced by the heavenless devil monarch. He had suffered a great loss during the exchange. Although he had relied on the northern region's luck to barely have the ability to challenge the severely injured heavenless demon monarch, the difference in strength between them was too great. As time dragged on, he would eventually be exposed. Not reaching that level meant not reaching it. The heavenless demon monarch's confidence was not without reason. Indeed, he had the strength to suppress the ancient times. The moment he moved, he felt like his body would fall apart. It's already pretty good that you can fight with me until now. Unfortunately, you have not reached that level. In the end, you are only a peak heavenly venerate. Borrowing the dynasty's luck is useless. I also cherish talents. As long as you are willing to submit to me, I can spare your life, the heavenless demon monarch said as he looked at the North Tianzuan. Although the North Tianzuan was not worth mentioning to him, a person of this level was already an outstanding figure among outstanding figures in countless epochs. Even someone as arrogant as the heavenless demon monarch was willing to give the North Tianzuan a chance. Tui! The North Tianzuan spat out a mouthful of blood and smiled with a somewhat bitter expression. I am the Fortune Divine Dynasty's North Tianzuan. Do you think it is possible for me to surrender? Come on, unless I die, you can forget about leaving. Good, you are a true man. I will send you on your way. The heavenless demon monarch shouted and took the initiative to attack. Chapter 3765. Just as the northern region's northern venerate was waiting for Yi Shiwen's reinforcements, Yi Shiwen came out of seclusion. He could sense the great changes in the world. After successfully condensing the fate of the Fortune God dynasty, he had a faint connection with the Fortune God dynasty and even the entire martial epoch. If anything happened, he could sense it in the shortest time possible. However, the instant he came out of seclusion, an incomparably huge grave fell from the sky and landed on the outskirts of the Fortune God capital. Endless corpse aura spread out, covering the entire central region in almost an instant. The horrifying corpse aura spread out. Finally, the flesh of many living beings exploded when they came in contact with the death aura, turning into dead spirit. Yi Shiwen made a prompt decision, and the revered martial seal flew up. It transformed into rays of light that covered the entire sky and instantly enveloped the entire world. It formed a barrier and blocked the corpse energy within a radius of millions of miles, preventing it from spreading out. What a heavy corpse aura! Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. At this moment, he could no longer care about helping the northern region. He directly stepped into the barrier filled with corpse aura. The corpse aura wanted to corrode him, but it could not even break through the golden surface of his body. Corpse Dao Epoch. Yi Shiwen quickly recognized that the corpse aura came from an epoch called the Corpse Dao Epoch. There were all kinds of legends about zombies in many epochs, and the source of these legends was the Corpse Dao Epoch. It was another terrifyingly tyrannical epoch. According to the information about the Corpse Dao Epoch collected by the Fortune God dynasty, the formation of the Corpse Dao Epoch was very strange. The previous epoch suddenly spread out with endless corpse aura, catalyzing all living beings in this epoch into zombies. The laws of heaven and earth were also infected, and the heavenly Tao was also changed. Because there was no energy to go through the great apocalypse, it was born directly. It could be said that it inherited the rich heritage of two epochs. When the Corpse Dao Epoch was in power, it was unparalleled. It even took the initiative to attack other ancient epochs, infecting these ancient epochs and turning them into a world dominated by the Corpse Dao. In the end, many ancient epochs attacked it and destroyed it. The moment Yi Shiwen stepped into this enchantment, the huge tomb issued a cracking sound, and then slowly cracked open. In the center of the grave was a coffin that looked like it was carved out of gold. The coffin suddenly opened and the lid slowly opened. A middle-aged man with a resolute face appeared in it. However, there was a faint demonic air about him. Suddenly, the middle-aged man opened his eyes. In an instant, the sky changed color and an endless amount of terrifying corpse aura swept out like a violent storm. It was actually going to attack the barrier formed by the Martial Saint Seal. With just this terrifying aura, it was going to reopen the barrier. It was really terrifying. The middle-aged man flew out of the coffin and faced Yi Shiwen from a distance. A strange demonic smile appeared on his resolute face, and he said, "I didn't expect to meet such a powerful heavenly master just after coming out. As long as I swallow your blood essence, I can replenish a lot of my lifespan." Yi Shiwen just looked at the middle-aged man coldly. He could feel the loss of life from the middle-aged man. Even though the middle-aged man had already transcended the world, he still couldn't transcend life and death. Yi Shiwen had felt this from some old antiques who had yet to prove their Tao. They were like this when their lifespan was near the end and the Angel 5 decay. However, if the Angel 5 decay had already reached such a serious level, it wouldn't take long for him to die of old age. How could he still survive until now? Yi Shiwen immediately glanced at the coffin, and suddenly understood. The coffin had shielded him from some kind of Tao law of death, allowing him to temporarily avoid death, and lay in it to linger for a while. Once he left the coffin, his lifespan would start to count down. He has already aged to such an extent. No wonder he is willing to risk his life to kill the martial epic's heavenly Tao. Although he knew that those old antiques who dared to risk their lives were probably already forced into a dead end, he hadn't thought that it would be like this. It was already the time for their lifespan to end like this. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Shiwen arrogantly and said, "Tell me your name. Although you are still just an ant to me, you are already qualified for me, the violent corpse venerate, to remember your name." Although Yi Shiwen was still just an ant in his eyes. If he hadn't crossed that level, then he hadn't crossed that level. However, Yi Shiwen's aura was particularly strong. It had obviously surpassed the ordinary peak heavenly venerables. This made him a bit interested. "Eastern heavenly venerate of the Fortune Divine Dynasty," Yi Shiwen said indifferently. The violent corpse venerate grinned and said, "Your body is pretty good. After I suck your essence blood dry and bury your body, another corpse path expert will be born in 1,000,000,000 years. At that time, I will have another general under me." "Ha ha, just right, just right. That depends on whether you have the ability or not." Yi Shiwen didn't get angry with him, and only said coldly, "Ha ha, you have character. For the martial epic to be able to give birth to someone like you, it is not simple. Unfortunately, it will be destroyed soon." The violent corpse venerate grinned and said, "This is the place where my path to becoming a supreme ruler will be built." "In your dreams," Yi Shiwen said coldly. "What? You still want to stand in front of me? You really overestimate yourself. This time, the martial epic will fall. This is the general trend. You are just an insignificant heavenly venerate, and you want to be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot?" The violent corpse venerate said coldly. He didn't care about Yi Shiwen at all. "With us half-step sovereigns taking action, the martial epic is destined to be destroyed. Who can stop us? Half-step sovereigns, indeed. Half-step sovereigns are very powerful, but they haven't reached the sovereign realm yet, right? Since they haven't reached the sovereign realm yet, there is still time," Yi Shiwen said coldly. Across from him, the reviled corpse venerable just chuckled and said, "You've calculated it well. You've probably noticed that my lifespan has entered a countdown. But if you think that you alone can exhaust me to death, then you're gravely mistaken." "Exhaust you to death? I have never thought of that. I only have one thought, and that is to kill you." Yi Shiwen immediately made his move. He put on the good fortune treasure robe, and held the sword of fate in his hand. Cutting the heavens and earth. The sword came from the west, and the sky changed color. This sword gave people a horrifying feeling as if the entire world was being cleansed in blood. "You are just a puny heavenly venerate. Even if you have a half-step sovereign Tao artifact, what can you do to me?" The violent corpse venerate didn't care about Yi Shiwen at all. But suddenly, all of a sudden, the void trembled. He suddenly felt as if the entire world had been locked down, directly locking him in place, and he could only directly resist this sword. The void collapsed. This sword wasn't just a sword light, but a manifestation of the sword Tao's law. It directly chopped down at him. This sword surpassed the speed of light, surpassing the speed of the Big Bang, and directly chopped down. Originally, this wasn't a big deal. However, when Yi Shiwen's sword fell down, he actually felt a kind of apprehensive feeling. This was his intuition, his sixth sense. He decided to believe in his sixth sense, but he had nothing to fear. At his level of cultivation, he had seen all kinds of storms and waves, and who knew how many peerless heroes he had seen. Bang! The violent corpse venerate directly clenched his fist, and then instantly turned into a horrifying light, smashing towards the sword. Boom! This move could be said to be earth-shattering, and the terrifying aftermath of the battle directly spread out. In an instant, The final creatures that had been affected by the violent corpse venerate's corpse aura and turned into corpses were all annihilated. They directly turned into nothingness in the boundary. And formed by relying on the martial venerate's seal, the violent corpse venerate didn't hold back with this attack, but unlike what he had expected, Yi Shiwen wasn't directly smacked away, vomiting blood and retreating. In fact, Yi Shiwen only swayed slightly, and the violent corpse venerate's power was dispersed. The violent corpse venerate was almost the same, and he didn't even gain any advantage in this attack. This was an unprecedented situation. A mere peak heavenly venerate was actually able to fight him to a draw. He couldn't help but feel a little unable to accept this. However, before he could say anything, Yi Shiwen once again slashed down in front of him. It was another heaven and earth slash. This sword was as fast as lightning, and at the same time, its power was tyrannical and terrifying. This sword illuminated the entire area and even overshadowed the light of the blazing sun in the sky. The aura of this sword shook all living beings in the central region, and it was terrifyingly powerful. "How dare you!" The violent corpse venerate couldn't accept this. In his eyes, this ant actually dared to take the initiative to attack him. He was simply courting death. However, he didn't have much time to think at this time. His entire body was glowing, emitting a cold corpse aura. A metallic battle armor appeared, and every scale seemed to be made of the most precious material in the world. He was already enraged, and he had to make this peak heavenly venerate of the Fortune Divine Dynasty pay the price. He had to make him understand the terror of a half-step sovereign realm expert's rage. Boom! Both sides collided, and another earth-shattering wave rose up outside the Fortune Divine capital. Chapter 3766. In the northern and central regions, extremely powerful half-step sovereigns from the ancient era appeared one after the other. This was undoubtedly a huge shock for the experts of the entire Fortune world. Although Yi Shiwen had already informed them that the doomsday was coming, but it had suddenly come so fast that it still shocked everyone. When half-step sovereigns made their move, they had to restrain all the experts of the great regions. Even so, it was still difficult to resist. In other words, if the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty's strength was gathered to deal with one or two half-step sovereigns, it wouldn't be a problem. However, if at least 5 half-step sovereigns joined the battle, they wouldn't be able to gather the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty's strength. Even when the central and northern regions were attacked, the experts of the various regions did not blindly come to support them. After all, they did not know if the other regions might encounter half-step sovereigns from the ancient era. Based on the appearance of these 2 half-step sovereigns in the past few years, although they were not at their peak, they were still able to delay the northern heavenly venerate and the eastern heavenly venerate. Or rather, it was the northern heavenly venerate and the eastern heavenly venerate who were barely able to delay them. The eastern heavenly venerate was doing fine, as he could still fight evenly with the evil corpse violent venerate. However, the northern heavenly venerate was only holding on with all his might. No one knew how long he could hold on for. Once the northern heavenly venerate fell, it was only a matter of time before the northern regions turned into a ghost town. Regardless of whether it was the Primal Chaos Divine Dynasty or the Fortune Divine Dynasty, regardless of which faction they belonged to, they all felt sorry for the loss of their own kind. It was clear that these ancient epochs' half-step sovereigns did not come for any one of them, but for the entire martial epoch. If they succeeded, they would not be able to live. Just as half-step sovereigns descended from the sky in the northern and central regions, a half-step sovereign finally appeared in the outer regions. The moment he appeared, all the abilities of the creatures in the outer regions seemed to be extracted from their bodies. Then, they turned into millions of multicolored abilities that flew towards that figure. This figure descended directly on the Chaos God capital of the Chaos God dynasty, which was also the incomparably huge island. His appearance shocked all the celestial venerates and emperor lords of the entire outer domain. It was too terrifying. Just one person could suppress the entire Tempest Sea region. Be it sovereign emperors or heavenly venerates, none of them could retaliate. That was especially true of the foreign creatures who mainly cultivated divine abilities. Their bodies instantly exploded, turning into endless waves of blood. Their life essence was all absorbed by this figure. He was simply too powerful. There was simply no one who could match him. However, the foreign emperor and heavenly venerables didn't despair. They still had the primal chaos hegemon, who was also a powerful half-step ruler. He could protect them. State your name. A cold bellow could be heard from the chaotic sacred capital. Who else could it be other than the chaotic overlord? Era of divine abilities, Lord of divine abilities. The figure spoke slowly. He actually walked into the chaos divine capital step by step, as if he wasn't worried about entering the tiger's den. He didn't care about the outer domains at all. This behavior naturally caused the dissatisfaction of many Empyreans and emperors from the outer domains. He simply didn't care about them at all. The Lord of Mystic Abilities was simply too terrifying. His towering aura suppressed everyone present, and all of a sudden, another terrifying aura erupted forth, clashing with the Lord of Mystic Abilities' aura. It was the Primal Chaos Hegemon. The Primal Chaos Overlord had a somewhat complicated expression on his face. What Yi Shiwen said earlier, that the great changes in the world might cause the entire martial epoch to fall apart. He had always hoped that it was fake, but it still happened. Up until now, 3 peak half-step rulers had appeared. Any one of them could be a match for him. Although these 3 people were either hanging on to their last breaths or extremely old, he wasn't any better. The essence that he had suffered from being suppressed for so many years couldn't be replenished in a short time. Why have you come to my Chaos Divine Dynasty? The Primal Chaos Hegemon didn't attack immediately. Instead, he looked at the Lord of Divine Abilities in front of him. This was a strong opponent. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he wasn't willing to make an enemy of the other party. I would like to invite you to a feast of gluttony. The Lord of Divine Abilities looked calmly at the Primal Chaos Hegemon and said. He didn't hide his origins and spoke directly. A feast? Using the martial epoch as your meal? What a big appetite! The Primal Chaos Hegemon smiled faintly, a hint of mockery in his smile. What makes you think I will agree? You should be very clear that although we won't die after losing our epoch, we will forever lose the ability to advance further. Do you think I will agree? You will agree. The Lord of Divine Abilities said calmly, the destruction of the martial epoch has cut off your path. However, with the martial epoch as resources, it will be enough for you to continue on your broken path. The existence of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch has already exhausted all the luck of the martial epoch. It is already impossible for you to advance to the ruler realm. You have no other choice but to cooperate with us. The Lord of Divine Abilities was very confident. Before he made his move, he had already investigated the existence of the Primal Chaos Hegemon. Perhaps the existence of the Primal Chaos Hegemon was their final target. If they really forced the Primal Chaos Hegemon to his limits, the Primal Chaos Hegemon would die in the final sublimation battle. However, at least one of them would fall. No one knew who that person was, and no one wanted to be that person. The best way was to let the Primal Chaos Hegemon participate in this feast. In any case, there were already so many people at the table with knives and forks in their hands. 1 or 2 more did not matter. You guys are really confident. The Primal Chaos Hegemon grinned, as if he was very tempted. The Lord of Divine Abilities nodded and said, because this is your best choice. I can spare these outer realms, your disciples and grand disciples. How many you can protect will depend on your ability. My target this time is the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. I am different from the heavenless demon monarch and the evil corpse mad venerate. They are either severely injured or dying of old age. They all need large amounts of life essence to recover to their peak to suppress the martial epoc's heavenly Tao. However, I am different. I am not in such a rush. I can spare your disciples and grand disciples from the outer realms. How about it? Facing the Lord of Divine Abilities' words, the primal chaos hegemon only said, "It looks like you guys have already discussed this before coming here. Hunt in different areas." Some anger appeared on the primal chaos hegemon's face. He did not think that this was a big deal. He was also indifferent. For the sake of recovering his essence, he would also stir up a bloodbath. What he was angry about was that he had actually become the meat on someone else's plate. Even the fortune creation Heavenly Lord had never treated him like this. That sounds pretty good. The primal chaos hegemon smiled faintly. However, what if I say I am not willing? The Lord of Divine Abilities revealed a somewhat stunned expression. This was because he had never expected the primal chaos hegemon to refuse. In a situation where they held an absolute advantage, no one should refuse. Even if the primal chaos hegemon erupted and went berserk, and could take away one of them, he would also die. The Lord of Divine Abilities did not believe that the primal chaos hegemon would be so foolish. For the sake of survival, they dared to attack the martial epoch. The primal chaos hegemon should have no reason to refuse. Why? The Lord of Divine Abilities asked. Because I am afraid. I am afraid that I will become like you. In order to prolong my life, I will struggle with all my might. I will be as laughable as a clown. The primal chaos hegemon's smile grew wider. It was as if he had figured out some problem. Before you came, I was still hesitating. I still could not figure it out. But now that I see you, I think I understand what choice I should make. If I become like you, it will be too unsightly. The path of cultivation has always been an indomitable path. There is no possibility of turning back. So what if you prolong your life for one epoch after another? After so many epochs, have you broken through? The primal chaos hegemon said, "You will never be able to break through, because you have lost your Tao heart. Now, in this era, this is our stage. I am about to show my strength. I want to prove to the world that I am not inferior to the fortune creation Heavenly Lord. Yet, you people dare to come and destroy my stage. Do you think I will agree?" After saying that, the primal chaos hegemon's entire aura changed. It was not that his strength had greatly recovered, but his mentality had changed. He had once again strengthened his Tao heart. He understood that this was not an internal struggle like the one with Yi Shiwen. Only in the martial epoch would he have the highest possibility of advancing to the ruler level. Without this stage, he would also have his path cut off. Now, the Lord of Divine Abilities and the others had come to destroy his path. He compromised. Even if he prolong his life, he would not be able to advance any further in this lifetime. The path of cultivation itself was full of thorns. If he was afraid, how could he walk this path to the end? Life and death were very important, but some things transcended life and death. Some things even transcended life and death. The primal chaos hegemon looked at the figure of Yi Shiwen, who was fighting fiercely in the central region boundary. He was surprised. He only understood this now, but Yi Shiwen probably understood it long ago. No wonder he could cultivate to such a level in such a short time. Since ancient times, who was not afraid of death? How many people could truly transcend life and death? Back then, the fortune creation Heavenly Lord did not compromise even in the face of the enormous pressure from the half-step rulers and even the threat of death. That was how the fortune creation God dynasty came to be. Now, he had a complete epiphany. He also wanted the world to understand that he, the primal chaos hegemon, was not inferior to anyone in this lifetime. Chapter 3767. This was a transformation of the great Tao of the mind. This allowed the primal chaos overlord to walk out of the haze of being suppressed for many years. In fact, this was also the sum of his thoughts while he was suppressed. He used this opportunity to comprehend it. An unprecedented battle erupted in the Tempest Sea region and the primal chaos divine capital. This battle was much more terrifying than the battles in the Fortune divine capital and the northern region. This was because the two people in the battle were clearly stronger and in better condition than the other two half-step sovereigns. This made them even more horrifying. However, the appearance of the mystic ability Lord also plunged many people into despair. Half-step sovereigns descended one after another. This was the third one. Ordinary beings could only feel the world changing. The heavenly Tao was suddenly sealed. Problems appeared everywhere. Tsunamis, landslides, and even the sky collapsing in some places. Although the heavenly Tao had no consciousness, it was like a huge computer, handling the operations of the entire Fortune realm and the various worlds of the martial epoch in an orderly manner. Why fire was hot? Why water flowed downwards? These were all controlled by the heavenly Tao. There were also some natural disasters. When the heavenly Tao was present, it naturally could not erupt all at once, turning the world into a land of ghosts. However, when the heavenly Tao was no longer present, or in other words, when it was powerless to control it, the world would collapse. There would no longer be any restrictions to regulate these actions. All sorts of natural disasters erupted at once. This was a general eruption. As time passed, these natural disasters erupted more and more violently. Soon, the various sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates had no choice but to come out and personally suppress the various natural disasters. Only they could do this. After all, they were extreme Tao experts. They could control all laws and help the world suppress all sorts of natural disasters. But even so, he still felt like he was caught off guard. These peak experts of the ancient epoch had not even made a move yet, but they were already flustered. They could not react in time. However, the situation did not improve because of the efforts of these sovereign emperors and heavenly venerates. On the contrary, it became even worse. Thus, another half-step ruler from the ancient epoch had descended. It was an old woman with a ghostly aura, but she gave off a grand and dignified feeling. She descended upon the eastern domain. Her terrifying aura instantly turned everything within 5 million kilometers of the eastern domain into a boundless ghost realm. All the living beings in the area were instantly drained of their essence blood, and their bodies turned into malicious ghosts. These malicious ghosts swarmed in all directions to open up new territories. It was simply too terrifying. As far as she could see, ordinary creatures were unable to attract her attention at all. Under the effects of the laws of the Ghost Tao, they were completely turned into a river of essence blood, which then surged into her body. Only those imperial emperors and heavenly venerables could attract her attention. Kaka, these are all excellent nourishing medicines. Let Grandma love you. The old woman smiled strangely. The wrinkles on her face squeezed together, making her look extremely terrifying. She stretched out her ghastly claws, and a high-level sovereign monarch was unable to escape at all. She grabbed him, and with a sudden squeeze, the high-level sovereign monarch's head exploded. Then, as his body twitched non-stop, his blood essence was instantly sucked dry. Her complexion was obviously much better. An emperor-monarch. Another emperor-monarch. Over a dozen emperor-monarchs were unable to retaliate at all in front of the old woman. Their heads were directly crushed, and the essence blood in their bodies was sucked dry. The essence blood of an emperor-monarch was massive. Any drop of blood that fell could turn into a vast ocean. It had already transcended heaven and earth. With so many emperor-monarchs captured by the old woman and their essence blood sucked dry, the old woman could clearly feel that she had become a little stronger. She had regained some of her peak strength. At that moment, another figure appeared in her ghastly eyes. This figure contained intense essence blood. It turned out to be a heavenly venerate. She opened her ghastly claws again, and swiped at this heavenly venerate. Unlike the emperor monarchs who were killed without any reaction, this heavenly venerate reacted much faster. In practically an instant, he reacted. With a loud shout, a long saber appeared in his hand, and he slashed it down at the ghostly claw. Clang! This saber seemed to strike metal. The long saber could not break this ghastly claw at all. Then, the heavenly venerate was caught. No matter how much the heavenly sovereign struggled, it was useless in front of this ghostly claw. Then the old woman grabbed him and stuffed him into her fong-filled mouth. Crunching sounds could make one's hair stand on end as blood splattered out like juice. She even burped, revealing 2 rows of terrifying fangs stained with blood. "Tsk, tsk. I, Granny Ghost, have not eaten to my heart's content for a very long time." The old woman laughed strangely. "Without the suppression of the martial epoch, this is my world." The old woman let out a sharp ghastly howl as she ventured deeper into the eastern domain step by step. She did not advance very quickly, but with every step she took, she turned the world into a realm of ghosts. Her laws were changing everything. In the past, for a realm of ghosts to form to this degree, it would take at least hundreds of millions of years of development without anyone managing it. Now, it had formed in such a short time. All living beings in the eastern domain wept in grief. The realm of ghosts extended everywhere. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Countless people were calling for the existence of the East Heavenly Venerate. At this time, the Guardian, the East Heavenly Venerate, should appear. Throughout the dynasties of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, every time there was a crisis like this, several Supremes would come out to prevent such tragedies from happening. But at this time, Yi Shiwen obviously had no way to come out. And at this time, as if he had finally heard the cries of all living beings, a figure blocked in front of Granny Ghost and stared at her coldly. His entire body was tall and straight, like a treasured sword that soared into the sky. The aura he exuded seemed to have turned the entire world into a huge domain of swordsmanship. He almost single-handedly blocked the expansion of the realm of ghosts. When the ferocious ghosts were about to come out, they were completely turned into nothingness by the sword aura. "East Heavenly Venerate, the East Heavenly Venerate is here. East Heavenly Venerate, you finally appeared. East Heavenly Venerate, you must save us." All living beings prostrated themselves and looked at the shining and tall figure in the sky as if they had seen their savior. Seeing Yi Shiwen was like seeing her only hope. There were indeed many emperors and heavenly venerables in the eastern region. However, they were busy suppressing the abnormal weather in various places. They couldn't spare the time to stop this ghostly granny. Even if they stood in front of Granny Ghost, they couldn't stop her at all. The heavenly venerate who couldn't escape in time was the best example. That's not right. Isn't the East Heavenly Venerate suppressing demonic corpse mad venerate in the central domain? Ordinary living beings didn't know what was happening in the distant central domain, but the Emperor Lords and Heavenly Venerates knew. Yi Shiwen was fighting demonic corpse mad venerate. Since Yi Shiwen's main body was fighting demonic corpse mad venerate, who could be here now? This question popped up in everyone's mind. If Yi Shiwen's main body was in the central domain, then who was here? Soon, someone finally understood. This is a doppelganger, a doppelganger. No one expected that Yi Shiwen would arrange such a backup plan while he was in charge of the central domain. Many people were dissatisfied with Yi Shiwen's decision to guard the central domain, but they had to admit that the central domain was more important in the grand scheme of things. Moreover, the central domain was the key to guarding the entire Fortune God dynasty. If the central domain collapsed, then the Fortune God dynasty would also be finished. Only now did they know that Yi Shiwen had also prepared a backup plan in the eastern domain. However, the eastern domain was Yi Shiwen's foundation. How could he give up like this? And this was indeed Yi Shiwen's backup plan. It was his sword Venerate's doppelganger. Even if your main body is here, you can't be my opponent. You're just a mere doppelganger, and you dare to stand in front of me? Hee hee, you're really seeking your own death. Granny Ghost looked at Sword Venerate in front of her and sneered. What heavenly venerate? He didn't care about it at all. Moreover, this was just a doppelganger of a heavenly venerate. In his opinion, it was impossible for it to pose any threat. Is that so? Sword Venerate wasn't willing to say more. He flipped his palm, and a ribbon seal appeared in his palm. There were only 4 shining words on this ribbon seal, and it faintly connected with the entire Eastern domain. Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal. This time, Yi Shiwen didn't choose to bring the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal with him when he left the Eastern Domain to guard the Central Domain. The Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal was the condensation of the entire Eastern Domain's destiny. If he brought it to the Central Domain, its power would plummet by several levels. It could only display its greatest power in the Eastern Domain. Suddenly, the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Seal flew directly into Sword Venerate's body and became one with him. At the same time, Sword Venerate's strength skyrocketed, and his aura spread out layer by layer. In an instant, it rushed to the peak of Heavenly Venerate, and even surpassed the level of a peak Heavenly Venerate. His entire body was shrouded in blood-red energy, and the muscles all over his body were rupturing. The sudden influx of terrifying power caused his expression to become ferocious. Chapter 3768. Many people burst into tears when they saw Yi Shiwen appear. Originally, they didn't feel much about this new Eastern Venerable's imposing manner. However, now that their lives were in danger, they could only hope that the Eastern Venerable could stand up and save them. Yi Shiwen's expression changed. You actually integrated the destiny of the entire Eastern region into your body. Granny Ghost stared at Sword Master. Her ghostly eyes flickered with ghostly flames. This was somewhat similar to North Tianzuan's method, but there were also differences. North Tianzuan had only borrowed the destiny of the North region, while Sword Venerable had fused the destiny of the East region into his body. Sword Venerable had used the East Tianzuan seal to do all this, obtaining power that far exceeded his original strength. This would leave behind great consequences. Even Sword Master himself might not be able to survive. No one could really bear the terrifying destiny of a big region. It was just a matter of how long he could persist. Not to mention, this time, the entire Eastern Tianzuan seal would be greatly damaged. It might even seriously affect the destiny of the Eastern region. However, Yi Shiwen had no other choice at this time. Choosing Sword Master as a backup meant that the situation had reached the most urgent point. In this case, there was no other choice. Sitting and waiting for death was not Yi Shiwen's style. Even if he was facing a peerless existence of a half-step ruler, he would still be willing to be cut into pieces and dragged down the Emperor. You won't be able to survive if you do this. Since you have already formed an incarnation and have your own path, you are an independent individual. If your main body sends you to die, would you agree? Granny Ghost laughed strangely. It was obvious that she wanted to provoke the relationship between Yi Shiwen and Celestial Venerate. Ordinary spirit incarnations were just avatars of the main body's will. However, the relationship between Yi Shiwen and Sword Master was much more complicated. Although Sword Master was an incarnation, he had his own will and his own path. Although he couldn't go against Yi Shiwen's will, he wasn't as old-fashioned as ordinary avatars. Sword Master glanced at Granny Ghost with an indifferent and expressionless face. Your method of provocation is too low-level. Do you think it will work? We are originally one. I was used by the main body to verify another path. You are afraid. I'm afraid. Granny Gui coldly stared at the Sword Venerate with her ghostly eyes. What is there to be afraid of? Even if an ant like you integrated the destiny of the Eastern region, what can you do? You are afraid, revered swordsman shouted. In an instant, the color of the sky changed. He didn't stay here any longer. Countless rays of sword light shot out. The light of the sword Dao Law swept out and soared into the sky. It was millions of miles long and formed a terrifying domain that could destroy everything. If Sword Venerable's sword principal realm could only barely stop Granny Ghost's realm of ghosts, then it was now able to counterattack. More and more sword chi broke through the defenses of the realm of ghosts and rushed into it. Then, the sword chi turned into sword principal cultivators on the spot. Every one of them was like a guardian to slay demons and devils. They formed a frenzied flow that crazily killed the former living beings and the present malicious ghost. The sword cultivator that Yi Shiwen had evolved was too violent. Every sword principal could transform into a sword expert. Each of them had their own merits, but they were equally violent and powerful. Although those ghosts that had just turned into were also terrifying, they had just evolved. There was no ghost cultivation technique at all. They just swept through the sky with ghost energy. It was like two raging tides colliding, devouring each other and drowning everything else. You overestimate yourself. You are courting death, Granny Ghost said with a cold smile. Originally, I couldn't do anything if the destiny of this place didn't manifest. But since the borrowing seal has manifested, it's just right. I can refine a peerless martial instrument. Fate was incomparably terrifying. Naturally, the method to borrow fate was a peerless secret technique. Similarly, if it was refined into a celestial device, its power would be endless. However, generally speaking, very few people would do this. For an area that had its fate sucked away, destruction was only a matter of time. However, to Granny Gui, this did not matter. In any case, in her opinion, the martial epoch was about to end. The eastern region's luck would collapse with the martial epoch. She might as well refine a magic tool. Whoosh! The sword venerate finally made his move. A huge formation appeared beneath his feet, and in the next instant, he and Granny Ghost Mother appeared in the primal chaos. Teleportation formation. Granny Ghost reacted instantly. With her cultivation base, her surroundings could be said to be the toughest existence in the world. No space-time array formation should be able to affect her. But she was still teleported into the primal chaos in an instant. That was the reason why she was so shocked. However, Sword Master remained calm. He already knew that such ancient formations existed everywhere in the Fortune God dynasty. They were left behind by the Fortune Heavenly Lord. Although Heavenly Venerables would follow the unspoken rule of entering the primal chaos to avoid destroying the entire Fortune realm during the battles between the Fortune God dynasty and the Outer Realms, the Heavenly Venerables would follow the unspoken rule of entering the primal chaos to avoid destroying the entire Fortune realm. The primal chaos was the foundation of their existence and their home. Even Heavenly Venerables were unwilling to destroy it. Moreover, they could not bear the backlash of the world. The resentment of all living beings before their deaths would affect the Heavenly Tao. They would suffer retribution sooner or later. The other Heavenly Venerables would not stand idly by. Hence, this unspoken rule had been used. But there were always people who could break the unspoken rule, and there were always people who ignored it. And these formations were used at this time. Because they were left behind by the Fortune Heavenly Lord, the half-step sovereigns could be teleported away at this time. However, the price to pay was not small, so it would not be used under ordinary circumstances. At this time, a few more battlefields appeared in the universe's primal chaos. The half-step sovereigns who had descended were teleported into the primal chaos. Even the Chaos God dynasty was no exception. Although the Outer Realms were not under the Fortune God dynasty's jurisdiction, the Fortune Heavenly Lord was not a narrow-minded person. The Outer Realms were also a part of the Fortune realm. How could the Fortune God dynasty not be affected when it was destroyed? Many of the powerhouses on the ground breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that the half-step sovereigns had finally been teleported away. This level of powerhouse was too terrifying. No matter how powerful they were normally, they did not have the strength to fight back against such a level of existence. They're finally gone. This battle will be the end of the world. Are we really unable to break through this hurdle? Fortune, fortune, heavenly Lord, your people need your strength. Heavens, please punish these people. Countless living beings wailed. They had already given up all hope for their future. They had never encountered such an attack for generations. In the face of an apocalyptic battle of this level, they did not have the strength to fight back. They did not even have the ability to decide their own fate. They could only watch helplessly as the sky fell and the earth split. This is not the time to relax. Prepare for battle with all your strength. Mobilize the elites and be ready for battle. Orders came from the Emperor's inheritance, and even the heavenly venerate's inheritance. Unlike the ordinary living beings, these peak powerhouses had received Yi Shiwen's warning. Moreover, they were very clear about what an apocalyptic battle was. These half-step sovereigns were only the first wave. They did not only come to kill to replenish their strength, but also to personally destroy the various defenses of the Fortune realm. If they attacked with an army, the Fortune God dynasty's army would not be easy to deal with. These half-step sovereigns wanted to destroy the Fortune realm's defenses with their own strength. As long as they conquered the Fortune realm, the other worlds of the martial epoch would be like meat on the chopping board. They were nothing. Therefore, after these half-step sovereigns arrived, the armies of the various ancient epochs followed closely behind. The original plan was to lock the battlefield on the epic battlefield, where the Fortune Heavenly Lord had set up a barrier. They could only enter the Fortune realm if they could break through the 10 great divine cities on the epic battlefield. That was because the 10 great divine cities weren't randomly arranged. In truth, it was an incomparably huge array formation that sealed the path of the ancient era's invasion of the Fortune world. Every divine city was in no way inferior to the Fortune divine capital. Even half-step sovereigns would find it very difficult to take down the 10 great divine cities. The fall of Moon City last time could only be considered an accident, considering all sorts of reasons. But now that those half-step sovereigns from the ancient epoch had appeared here, it proved that the 10 great divine cities' defenses were no longer as secure. They still did not know what had happened, but they could not afford to be careless. Teams of elite soldiers were mobilized from the various inheritances. War fortresses the size of planets were also released from hidden dimensions. War beasts roaring at the sky began to come out of their cages, and ancient arrays began to operate. Powerful battleships floated in the sky, forming a huge fleet that blotted out the sky above the entire creation world. The Fortune realm's combat potential was completely unleashed. Compared to this scale, the previous battle between the Fortune God dynasty and the Chaos God dynasty was like child's play. This scale was 10 times or even 100 times greater than the previous battle. This continued until battleships that shone with the light of strange laws entered the creation realm from the distant sky. Chapter 3769. One after another, battleships glowed with the light of an inexplicable law as they leaped out of the void and charged in the direction of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Space ripples kept flashing like water ripples in the sky. Every time the ripples spread, a battleship thousands of miles wide and tens of thousands of miles long would fly out of the ripples. Each of these battleships had the ability to destroy the heavens and earth, and they had been forged with countless materials. But now they were like dumplings being thrown into a pot, densely packed together. Upon closer inspection, these battleships could be divided into different styles. Obviously, they belonged to different epochs. They were extremely tyrannical and terrifying. These battleships were divided into fleets and swept across the Fortune realm. They had no intention of gathering all their forces. Obviously, they had absolute confidence in themselves and were heading in different directions according to different epochs. Obviously, they had already divided their territories before coming here. A huge battleship flew across the sky and directly crushed an ancient inheritance. On the battleship, countless cannons opened and countless arrays and boundaries rotated rapidly, turning into a terrifying energy tide that directly bombarded the ancient inheritance's ancestral land. In the next moment, the ancestral land turned into a speck of dust. Inheritance, boundaries, and arrays were too insignificant in the face of this attack. This was an attack that could destroy the heavens and earth. There was nothing more terrifying than this attack. After this attack, the battleship's hatch opened, and groups of iron cavalry gave off terrifying auras as they swept out. The flames of war were everywhere, and the heavens and earth were collapsing. These people did not have any other goals. They only wanted to destroy this era and everything they saw. "I'll fight you to the death." In the ancestral land, an incomparably old voice sounded. Then, a figure with white hair and a stooped figure carrying a cracked spear charged towards the foreign invaders. "Ancestor, it's the ancestor! Heavens, open your eyes and look at the miserable state of your people. Go, follow the ancestor and fight them to the death." This figure directly slaughtered his way into the invading army. The long spear in his hand already had cracks on it, densely covered with the marks of time. But in that instant, he erupted. It was as though he had returned to his peak, the era when he could wield his spear and kill everything. The figure was no longer stooped. He was now incomparably tall and straight. All of his snow-white hair and beard had turned black again. His figure was still tall and straight as if he had never been seriously injured. However, everyone knew that this wasn't a good thing. He was burning the last bit of glory in his life to fight for a chance of survival for his clansmen, just like what he had done countless times for his clansmen. Boom! Wherever the spear passed, groups of invaders would instantly turn into nothingness. This was a quasi-emperor expert who had once been extremely glorious and was only a step away from becoming an extreme Dao expert. But in the end, he was still injured in a great battle. Ever since then, he went into seclusion, hoping that he could survive for a while longer. When everyone thought that he had died, he came out of seclusion again to fight for his clansmen and for the world. Countless laws on the long spear shone with the brilliance of a supreme expert. Wherever the spear light passed, it was as though a huge immemorial divine mountain range had swept across, flattening everything. He had regained his invincibility. He had once fought terrifying enemies, and his current performance hadn't disgraced the first half of his life. However, just when everyone thought that he would be able to save the world and kill over 10,000 powerful enemies, a large hand grabbed down from the warship. It was a figure filled with ghastly aura. It was also an expert from the Ghost Epoch. His huge hand came crashing down. The ancestor of the ancestors' land raised his long spear to meet the incoming attack, but it was of no use. Any resistance seemed pale and powerless in front of this huge hand. "Emperor, it's the Emperor!" Many surviving creatures in the ancestors' land screamed miserably. They could only watch helplessly as the Ghost Epoch's Emperor grabbed their ancestor and swallowed him. The ancestor continuously rejected the ancestor and turned him into essence blood to replenish his exhaustion. In front of a sovereign emperor, any kind of quasi-emperor would be too powerless. Those who had not attained the Tao had unimaginably terrifying strength. However, this was the martial epoch. Even though they were emperors and heavenly venerates, they still needed to replenish their exhaustion. Here, they could not obtain the power of the world to replenish themselves. The world here rejected them from the start, like a virus invading a healthy body. Under normal circumstances, when they entered the fortune realm, the martial epoch's heavenly Tao would show its might. There would be heavenly lightning striking them, earthly fire burning them, and astral winds blowing at them. Therefore, it would be very difficult for the invaders to invade the martial epoch. Their combat prowess would be reduced to less than 20 to 30% of their original strength. How could they defeat the local experts of the Fortune realm? No matter how many of them came, they would just be sending themselves to their death. In the distant Chaos era, before the Fortune Divine Dynasty was established, the entire Fortune world was in a state of disunity. In the era when foreign worlds' creatures ran rampant, the Fortune world was invaded by ancient eras, causing great losses. Since then, there had never been such a situation. However, now that the martial epic's heavenly Tao had disappeared, they could not even maintain the basic operations of the Fortune realm, not to mention prevent the invasion of these foreign enemies. They could only watch helplessly as these foreign enemies invaded the Fortune realm. Without this ancestor's protection, the ancestor's land was quickly swept through by the Ghost Epic's cavalry. The Ghost Epic's cavalry devoured all the creatures' essence blood and turned them into ghost servants for their use. The once prosperous ancestors' land had turned into a land of ghosts in a short time. Only the mournful wails of countless malicious spirits remained. Everything was gone. Such a situation was happening all over the Fortune realm, and it wasn't just happening in one place. The flames of war had already spread throughout the Fortune realm. The Fortune realm's living creatures' mournful wails could be heard everywhere. No one could imagine what kind of miserable situation this was. Everything looked like the end of the world. Everywhere, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Living beings died miserably. Even death wasn't the end. Their souls turned into slaves and worked for the invaders. Countless living creatures could only cry and wail as they watched everything unfold before them. They could do nothing. They were simply too weak. At the same time, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's experts protecting them were also fighting with all their might. No matter what camp they belonged to, no matter what great Tao they cultivated, they finally showed their value. However, after being supported by the people, they who were high up above finally displayed their value. When foreign enemies invaded, they didn't cower back at all, because they also knew that there was no way back, that they were forced to the edge of a cliff. Bloody battles engulfed the entire Fortune realm. Armies were mobilized one after another, and countless arrows drowned out all the powerful enemies like dense layers of clouds. Countless armies fought against each other like a raging tide. Hundreds and thousands of people died at every moment, falling from the sky. Who knew how many people were trampled into flesh and blood in the sky? There were experts and elites from the Fortune realm as well as experts and elites from the ancient epic. The Fortune Divine Dynasty's accumulations thoroughly erupted. Even if the ancient epic could seal the heavenly Tao and interfere with the heavenly Tao's attacks, even if the ancient epic's half-step sovereigns slaughtered them, the Fortune Divine Dynasty's accumulations were still terrifyingly strong. This was where the ancient epic's armies and experts couldn't take any shortcuts. If they wanted to destroy the martial epic, they had to step over their corpses. Both sides had no way out. The victorious side would be even more glorious, imprinting their existence in the boundless river of history. From top to bottom, heavenly venerates fought bloody battles, sovereign emperors fought bloody battles, quasi-emperors fought bloody battles, and god-kings fought bloody battles. However, the situation didn't turn for the better for the Fortune realm. On the contrary, it worsened. As time passed, more and more ancient eras joined the fray. Although these ancient eras didn't have any half-step sovereigns, they had plenty of emperor monarchs and heavenly venerables. There were also many unrivaled armies that had conquered countless ancient epic. They appeared on the battlefield. It was impossible for these ancient epic's armies to challenge the martial epic alone. Everyone knew how terrifying the martial epic was. However, if it was just to beat them up when they were down, many people would be tempted. At the start, they needed to organize. However, as time went on, more ancient epic's armies joined in, all for the sake of getting a share of this feast. The martial epic looked like it would be destroyed soon. No one was willing to miss out on this feast. These ancient epics armies did their best to participate, especially now that the martial epic could no longer turn the situation around. The more this was the case, the more they wanted to participate. Everyone wanted to participate in something that did not require much effort but could bring great benefit. This force was like a rolling snowball, growing larger as it went, putting the martial epic into a truly desperate situation. At the start, the martial epic held a certain advantage with the peak Tao experts like the heavenly venerates and sovereign emperors. However, as more and more ancient epic experts joined in, they soon leveled out, even surpassing the martial epic. In the end, every heavenly venerate and sovereign emperor had to face 2 or even 3 or more experts of the same level. Even though they were peak Tao experts, this was a sure-death situation. A pack of wolves will bite a tiger to death. I've planned this for 100,000 years, and it finally succeeded. A figure in the boundless void watched the endless massacre of the Fortune Divine Dynasty and could not help revealing a cold smile. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.